The young lady reaches out her hands to the little boy, trying to calm him down. His mother at this time explains that the child was attacked by a magical beast. Then she turns to the lady saint and begs her to help the boy. The young lady uses her power and begins to heal the bruise on his body. The boy watches this through tears and does not hide his surprise. When the healing is complete, he looks in shock at his hand, which appears completely healthy. The boy admires what he sees and sincerely thanks the Holy Lady. His mother also bows and thanks her from the bottom of her heart. The main character says goodbye to them with a warm smile. The girl understands that this temple helps sick and crippled people. Holy healers work here, and the place itself is considered sacred. All these girls are candidates for sainthood, and their duty is to heal those in need. The young lady heals the wound on her own hand and realizes that she serves in this very temple. At this time, the other saints begin to whisper and discuss what they saw. One of the girls says she can't believe the young lady can't heal without taking on other people's symptoms herself. They consider this an outrage because the young lady suffers every day, and they declare that she is an imperfect saint. The main character realizes that her power has a peculiarity. She takes on people's injuries and then heals them through her own pain. The girl believes that this is how she repays her debt to the temple that sheltered her after her parents fell into eternal sleep, and this is the best thing she can do. She decides that she can withstand any pain and also hides another unnecessary ability. At that moment, someone puts a hand on her shoulder and speaks to her. She has offered to work hard today. The young lady recognizes her friend and smiles. The girl hugs her and asks Rua not to pay attention to the words of others. She says that Rua always diligently carries out his duties and hardly makes any mistakes. That's why they became such close friends. The main character thanks Ariana for everything she has done for her. She admits that she wouldn't have been able to cope without her, and Ariana replies that that's how it should be between friends. Ariana then points to one guy and turns to Rua. She asks if this is Mr. Galt. The young lady confidently replies that it is him. She remembers the time when she first started serving and was very nervous. Then Galt approached the saint. He showed the wound on his hand and asked for help. The girl agreed and used her power. But then it didn't work, and the wound didn't go away. The young lady began to apologize and ask permission to try again. However, the second attempt also did not produce results, and she did not understand how to cope further. In the end, she used her power again and still managed to heal his wound. The guy put his hand on her shoulder and said that everyone has failures. He asked her if she would like to become his saint one day. He promised to work hard for the country's future. And he asked her not to lose faith in herself either. Since then, Rua has kept those words in her heart, seeing Galt become the commander of the knights and realizing that she needs to try hard too. Now she only looks at him with gratitude. Ariana smirks and says that Rua will soon burn a hole in him with her gaze, and she shyly objects. Ariana continues and assures that she knows what Rua is thinking. She says Galt and Rua look good together. The main character becomes even more embarrassed, and her friend reminds her that saints can also fall in love. Ariana takes Rua's hands and says she blesses them. After all, she wishes only happiness for her dearest friend. Rua replies with a smile that he also loves Ariana very much and will definitely tell her about his love. Ariana happily agrees. They seal their promise with a pinky oath. After some time, one of the temple workers runs in shouting, demanding that the stretcher be carried immediately, and Rua does not understand what happened. She sees in horror that Mr. Galt is lying on a stretcher and does not understand how this happened. The young lady looks at the barely breathing guy and thinks, why him? Some say he was attacked by a magical beast while protecting his subordinates. The wounds are too serious, and even the powers of holy healers are unlikely to help because his hero's path may end. The main character is shocked to realize that this cannot be. She decides to heal Galt herself. Soon the girl enters the room where he is lying. She thinks that no matter how painful it is, she will save him. Even at the risk of her life, she is ready to go all the way. Galt's wounds disappear as if they had never been there, but all the pain is transferred to Rua, and she thinks that everything is fine now. She realizes that she needs rest, returns to the room, and, lying down, feels how her whole body is torn apart by pain, not having time to heal. Rua closes her eyes and images appear before her. She wonders if it's them, memories that flash before falling into eternal sleep, and it seems that this is how she will say goodbye to life. The girl closes her eyes, from which tears flow, but after a while, she suddenly wakes up in shock. She thinks she's survived, and hopes that Galt has recovered too. She wants to see Ariana and talk to her. At this moment, the maid who had been looking after her appears. She asks in surprise if she has really woken up. Rua tries to say something, but the woman says that she quit her job. She says that Rua has disappeared to an unknown location, and the heroine doesn't understand what she's talking about. The maid continues, saying that Rua spent a month in bed after her injuries and that no one visited her. She then adds that it would be better if Rua never woke up at all. The young lady is completely perplexed, but decides to ask about the main thing. She wonders what's wrong with Mr. Galt. The maid replies that it is his wounds. Lady Ariana healed, risking her life. Rua doesn't understand what they're talking about, and the woman declares that Ariana is a true saint, unlike her. The maid says she will explain everything briefly. These two are having a great time together, and just recently it was decided to have a wedding. A short time later, Rua rushes down the corridor, not understanding how Ariana and Galt ended up together. And why did everything turn out this way? Everyone is talking about how they are suited to each other, and that Galt became a knight commander at a young age. He is called a folk hero, and is remembered for how he quickly resolved a conflict with a neighboring state. They also talk about battles with magical beasts, where the knights suffered losses but still survived. And Ariana, the count's daughter, healed the commander, risking herself as befits a true saint. The main character thinks that even if Ariana saved him, her body still aches, and the girls in the hallway say that Rua is the complete opposite of Ariana and is unworthy of being a saint. One of them claims to have heard that Rua ran away from the temple to have fun with some guy. Another adds that this is when she received her injuries, and that similar things have happened more than once. The girls are surprised why the high priest even accepted such a girl into the temple. They say Ariana has taken over her responsibilities, calling Rua shameless despite her modest appearance. Now the girls openly declare that the young lady has become a real disgrace to the temple. One of them confidently says that this is the pure truth. She claims to have heard all this personally from Ms. Ariana. The main character breathes heavily and cannot believe that Ariana could have spread such cruel rumors. After a short while, a young lady runs up to the two. She tries to catch her breath, and Ariana calmly asks if Rua has woken up yet, and she asks her friend to listen to her. Rua turns to Ariana and says that there has clearly been a misunderstanding. She reminds them that they are friends, and that Ariana herself once said important words. But Ariana suddenly screams and asks what exactly Rua is trying to do now. She then turns to Galt and asks him for help. The guy looks at the main character with a cold and stern gaze. After this, he roughly pushes her away and asks what she wants from Ari. The young lady falls to the floor. In complete shock, she looks at Galt and asks what he is doing. The guy replies that Ari told him everything, and that Rua was only pretending to be her friend. He says she used Ariana and abused her, which is unacceptable behavior. According to him, such a girl deserves only contempt. Rua, in despair, realizes that this is a lie and tries to say that it was she who healed all his wounds. But seeing his cold gaze, she realizes that any words are useless and they will not believe her. Then she wonders why she used her healing powers in the first place. Galt turns to Ariana and says that it is time for them to leave. Ariana walks up to Rua, touches her face, and mockingly tells her how pathetic and unhappy she is. She admits that she had long dreamed of seeing such an expression on her face. Ariana adds that Rua was just a convenient toy to help pass the time, and asks why not forgive her now. After all, according to her, they were best friends. After this, Ariana leaves, leaving Rua alone. The main character remembers the man she loved with all her heart. She starts laughing and calls herself stupid. Rua realizes that she has always been lonely, and due to severe stress, her hair begins to lose its color. At this moment, several drunkards approach her. One shouts that she is in the way, and the other mockingly asks what the holy lady is doing in such a place. One of the men suggests taking a closer look, and is surprised by her white hair, asking if they have seen anything like this before. When Rua remains silent, one grabs her by the hair and orders her to answer. The young lady calmly tells him not to touch her. She grabs his hand, and the man freezes in surprise. The next moment, he feels a sharp pain. He screams and swears in shock. The man falls to the floor, writhing in pain, and his friend panics and asks what happened. Rua realizes that she has always hidden a power that is the opposite of healing. She looks at her hand with a slight smile and realizes that this ability is much more useful than healing. After this, Rua makes a decision. She's not going to heal anyone anymore. An unknown guy is watching all this from behind a tree. There is a legend in the world about the events of several hundred years ago during the plague in the kingdom of Zeto. Then the girl with healing powers saved the people, and a temple was built in honor of the goddess Rush. The temple became an independent institution in whose affairs the royal power did not dare interfere. Girls with the same abilities as Rush. They serve as saints in the temple and heal people, and this power manifests itself in girls under 10 years of age. Most often, such children are born into aristocratic families. The most outstanding are officially elevated to the rank of saints, equal to royalty. There are currently several candidates in the temple, but the place of the true saint has been empty for 10 years, since a worthy one has not been found. Rua recalls that before becoming an orphan, she lived in the baron's family, and then she dreamed of becoming a saint. Now the girl sighs and realizes that several days have already passed. Her hair color never returned, and she realizes that she has experienced a severe shock, reaching the limit of her strength, almost plunging into eternal sleep. Rua remembers Ariana and doesn't know what to do next. At that moment, a scream is heard from behind, and the girls call her a defective saint, asking what she is doing here. The main character ignores them, but one of them points out her white hair. Rua remains silent. Girls stop having fun. One of them comes closer and slams her palm on the table. She demands that Rua listen to her. The main character smiles and asks if they are talking about her, apologizing and explaining that her name is not the defective saint. The purple-haired lady is confused, not understanding what she is talking about. Rua recalls how these girls used to bully her, pouring water on her and ruining her clothes. Ariana always stood up for her, and now Rua understands everything. Ariana only stopped the bullying. But in reality she was the same, making Rua believe in friendship for the sake of ridicule. Rua takes a cup of tea and realizes how much she used to be afraid of these girls. One of them shouts that the rosary is only for candidates for sainthood. She knocks the cup out of Rua's hands, and he starts laughing. Rua grabs her hand and calmly asks her to shut up. She asks if she could just shut up for a second. The purple-haired lady screams as she feels the heat in her hand. She is overcome with pain, she sees the bruise and does not understand what is happening, and Rua realizes the true nature of her power. She can bring back the pain and wounds that she once took upon herself. She once accidentally used this terrible ability on her mother. Then she thought that she would never see her again. Now Rua calmly looks at the girl writhing in pain, while the others panic and scream for her to be healed. But her friends are afraid and don't dare to help. One begs the other to try, but she refuses, fearing the consequences. Rua realizes that the pain conveyed to the lady once belonged to her own. She remembers that day in the temple. Then they shouted that the man had suffered from the fire of a magical beast and urgently needed healing. Rua came first and took the wounds, feeling unbearable pain. Ariana just sat down on the floor at that point and said she was tired. She then asked Rua to take on more patients. Rua knew she was already at her limit, while Ariana had only healed 2. But Ariana said that friends should help each other. Rua, remembering how she always protected her, agreed. Ariana was happy and said that she adored Rua. Rua responded in kind, but now she realizes how stupid she was. Now the main character is snapping her fingers. The purple-haired lady's pain suddenly goes away, and her friend asks in shock what happened. Rua realizes that Ariana and the others have always looked down on her and had no idea what she was capable of. And this power is beautiful in its own way. After this, Rua heads back into the room, realizing that all of this was inevitable. Now she realizes that it is time to return to her room. At this moment, someone calls out to her and asks for forgiveness. The young man then politely asks if she is Miss Rua Ristado. The young lady looks up and sees Svenzito Crown, realizing that before her stands the second prince, renowned for his intelligence and insight. Besides, he is dazzlingly handsome, and the prince says that he would like to distract her for a while because she knows about the dark side of the temple. Rua asks what he means and what exactly he wants. The prince extends his hand, praises her talents, and invites her to join him in seeking revenge. The main character looks at his hand in shock. Soon they are strolling through the garden of the royal castle. Rua understands that this is her first time here, and this garden seems even more beautiful and peaceful to her than the temple garden. His Highness says that he has ordered everyone to leave the garden so that no one will disturb them, and invites them to sit down. The young lady sits up and asks what exactly he meant by the dark side of the temple. She is interested in what we are talking about. The prince replies that in private she can call him by his name. He adds that if they ally, they will be able to speak even more freely, but Rua coldly declares that they are not accomplices. She looks at the prince with obvious wariness. He just smiles, stirs the tea, and asks what she thinks about the fact that the state has been suffering losses due to magical beasts for a year now. Rua asks if he wants to hear her opinion, and the prince asks if she finds it strange. After all, previously magical beasts lived in foreign forests and wastelands, and were found only in rare places. They were not present on the territory of their country until recently. The prince says that now animals suddenly appear inside the state and attack people. Rua suggests that someone is controlling these creatures and directing them towards the citizens. The prince replies that she hit the mark. He claims that the head of the temple is behind this. The prince says he suspects the head of the clergy, and Rua is shocked when she thinks about his holiness. She recalls that after her family was plunged into eternal sleep due to a rare disease, it was he who learned of her power and invited her to the temple. Rua says she needs time, admitting she's confused. She asks why anyone would do such a thing, and the prince replies that it is all for power. The more wounds, the more work the candidates have, and the greater the people's dependence. The people's faith is concentrated in a holy place, comparable in importance to a royal palace. In this way, the head of the clergy strengthens the influence of the church and gains control over the country. Rua exclaims that it is disgusting selfishness to cripple people and manipulate faith for profit. The prince agrees and adds that he is clearly not acting alone. 3 aristocratic families, who donate huge sums to the temple, are also involved. At the head of the family is the family of Count Torbiez, and Rua realizes with horror that it is Ariana's family. The prince says the head of the clergy probably made a deal with someone who can control magical creatures. According to spies, this is Yuan from the Western people. Rua realizes he's never heard the name before and asks if that's what he's been doing all along. The prince answers in the affirmative and adds that he cannot cope alone, but with her help everything is possible. He extends his hand again, and Rua asks why she was chosen. The prince replies that she has the necessary power and is not talking about healing, and about the ability to cause pain, asking if she doesn't mind such a name. He adds that this power must be used wisely, and Rua realizes that they already know about it. She realizes that she never thought about the benefit of this ability, but the prince turned out to be very perceptive. He says she will have a chance to take revenge on Miss Torbius. The prince admits it's mean, but they're no longer friends, and Rua apologizes, saying she hasn't decided yet. She asks if he will give her time to think about it. His Highness replies that of course, he will wait for her answer. Later, Rua walks down the hallway and realizes that if everything she said was true, she can't ignore it. She is no longer that naive girl and must personally verify the truth of the prince's words. When she goes outside, she hears someone calling Galt and sees Ariana. She asks if he is hurt, and the guy replies that everything is fine. Ariana laughs and says that even if he gets hurt, there is no need to worry. After all, if she was able to heal him on the verge of falling into eternal sleep, then she will be able to cope even more now. Galt says with a smile how kind Ari is. He hugs her and thanks her for saving him. Galt promises that next time he will definitely protect her himself. Rua is hiding around the corner at this time. As she is about to leave, someone calls out to her. Turning around, she sees the head priest, who asks if she is feeling better. Rua recognizes Frix Ronhutz, the head of the clergy, a respected and calm man with one flaw. He says he is glad to see her improvement, but does not approve of walks outside the temple. He hopes that she will be more careful, and Rua bows and agrees. She understands that the rumors definitely came from Ariana, but this does not prove her connection with magical beasts. The priest says that since she has come to her senses, she should return to her duties. Rua realizes that she is once again being asked to work without rest, even when others were allowed days off. It was an order from His Holiness, who said that she was not yet up to par with the others. Therefore, I must give my all for my own good. Rua thinks there is something more behind this, and decides to find out the truth. After some time, she comes to the royal library, amazed by its size. She hopes to find information about Yuan and what Prince Sven said. The Western people have golden eyes, dark skin, and live deep in the forests. They speak their own language, control magical creatures, and wear the mark of scales around their necks. Rua realizes that she didn't know any of this before. At this point, someone says that they haven't seen each other since yesterday. It turns out to be His Highness, and Rua is surprised at how quickly the distance between them has closed. She stands up and greets the prince. He responds in kind and invites her to sit down. The prince praises her for her prudence and desire to check everything herself. He then asks if she has made a decision about the head of the clergy. Rua replies that not yet, and the prince notes that she did study Yuan. He points to the guy behind him and calls him Shiji. He greets Rua, and she notices his golden eyes and dark skin. The prince introduces him as Shiji Rubin, a trusted assistant from the Western lands. Rua understands that foreigners were rarely accepted into service, and he realizes that Sven is free from prejudice. The prince says that Shiji is not directly related to the Yuan clan, but he learned a lot from the merchants and can help with the investigation. Rua stands up, bows, and says she is glad to meet you. Shiji replies that he is ready to do everything for His Highness. The prince adds that if the head of the clergy makes the next move, then it happens late at night, which surprises Rua. The prince says that she wanted to see everything for herself, and she will have a chance. He leaves wondering if the goddess he was looking for really is Rua. A few days later, Rua walks down the corridor at night, remembering the prince's words. She secretly leaves the room, but does not notice anything suspicious. Rua understands that if she is seen, dirty rumors will be spread again. But this doesn't bother her anymore, because she hopes that everything will end quickly. At that moment, the girl notices someone's silhouette flashing in the window, and an alarming thought immediately arises in her head that someone just passed by there. She decides to follow, and soon realizes that she has found herself at a prayer tower that was once intended to be demolished, but was ultimately simply abandoned and left unguarded. Looking around, the young lady notices a man standing near the tower itself. She recognizes him as the assistant to the head of the clergy, and at that moment, the man irritably says that he is late and asks where he has been for so long. The young man apologizes and calmly replies that the territory is too big and it's easy to get lost here. The main character becomes wary upon hearing familiar speech, and her attention is immediately drawn to the details. The language and the mark on the neck turn out to be the same as those of the people who can control magical beasts, and the girl thinks that it is good that Mr. Shiji taught her some words, because now she can understand part of the conversation. The assistant to the head of the clergy sharply tells the young man not to keep His Holiness waiting and to hurry. And then the girl sees with horror how the head of the clergy actually comes out of the tower, and at that moment it becomes clear to her that the deal is real, and she wants to see everything with her own eyes. She realizes that, if she can distract the guards, she can slip inside unnoticed. The young lady looks at her hand and thinks that if she uses her power carefully and wisely, then everything can work out. Realizing that she only has one chance, and that her ability only works when touched, she makes up her mind, approaches the guard, and calls out to him. The man cautiously asks who she is, and what she is doing here in the middle of the night. The girl confidently replies that she is a new temple servant just got lost, and ended up here by chance, after which she politely asks where the servants live. The assistant to the head sighs tiredly and says that she needs to return to that building, pointing in the direction. The main character thanks him and says that he literally saved her. At that moment, she grabs the man by the hand, and he is immediately pierced by a sharp pain in his head. He screams, complaining that his head is splitting, and loses consciousness, and the girl realizes that she has transferred her pain, which could cause fainting, to him and mentally asks him for forgiveness. She remembers that she once experienced something similar, after which she goes into the tower and snaps her fingers, calling the pain back. As the young lady makes her way between the boxes, she gets close enough to overhear the conversation and hears the head of the clergy say that he hopes for high results this time as well. He mentions that the attack on the village of Moraine was successful. The young man replies that control over magical beasts comes easily to him, and the holiness will get everything he desires. The main character finally becomes convinced that this is about attacks by magical beasts, and understands that the head of the clergy is indeed involved. She peers out from behind the boxes, trying to see who else is there, and at that moment another girl turns to His Holiness, asking him to listen to her. With horror, Rua recognizes the voice of Ariana, who asks if she remains a candidate, and immediately says that she wants to take the place of the saint as soon as possible. The man replies that they are only at the beginning of their journey, and asks how many days have passed since the head of the knights agreed to marry her after his hint. The main character closes her mouth in horror, realizing that Ariana has conspired with the holiness for the sake of marriage with the commander of the knights and for the sake of the place of the saint. Ariana happily replies that thanks to him everything is going as well as possible. She adds that a folk hero like Galt is approaching the Holy Virgin Ari, and she has long since decided so. The head of the clergy notes that such popularity among the people will only benefit them. The blonde lady says that the guy still can't let go of his unhappy love, and is walking around gloomier than a thundercloud. The main character thinks with pain about what kind of unhappy love they are talking about, and whether he really still remembers her. Ariana continues by saying that since they need to support each other, then he said that over time, he would be able to love her. And then he declares that otherwise he will make him suffer, and Rua is shocked, thinking how anyone can even say such things. The blonde lady contemptuously calls Rua a pathetic and defective saint, adding that His Holiness knows this better than anyone. The main character is shocked, and wonders if Ariana really always thought this way, since she sincerely trusted her. The head priest calmly notes that Rua is useful in her own way, and, no matter what, remains a good-natured girl. Rua clings to the word useful, and thinks with horror that all this time she was just a puppet. The blonde confidently declares that if everything continues like this, they will manage without her, because as soon as she becomes a saint, the remaining candidates will be turned into obedient dolls, and the priest agrees, adding that the first step remains the use of magical beasts for the true purpose. Rua ponders what this true goal means, and realizes that this is just the beginning. But at that moment, she accidentally makes a noise. The dark-skinned young man becomes wary, points to the boxes where she is hiding, and says that he heard the sound from there. The main character is in a panic and thinks about what to do, because she cannot be detected. At this moment, the prince's servant comes to her aid, grabs her hand and pulls her towards him. He releases several rats, and when Ariana notices them, she screams in horror. The young man immediately declares that this is the source of the noise, but Ariana squeals that she doesn't care, because she can't stand these disgusting dirty creatures, and demands that something be done immediately. Rua climbs out of the tower and bitterly realizes that for Ariana she was no different from these rats. When they finally get outside, the young lady thanks Mr. Shiji for his help. He calmly replies that there is no reason, because it was an order from His Highness, and he had been watching both her and the head of the clergy all this time. At this moment, another person approaches them and greets Rua. It turns out to be His Highness, who notices that the moon is especially beautiful today. The girl turns to him, and the prince says with a smile that he is surprised by her unexpected initiative and did not expect that she would decide to take such a risk. He adds that secret surveillance in an abandoned tower is not enough, because they can always find excuses. Shiji supports his words and says that they need irrefutable evidence. The prince nods and says he will repeat it again. He comes closer and says that he needs her strength, asking if she wants revenge and make them pay for their crimes. The main character thinks remembering Ariana's betrayal and how she herself was a doll in the hands of the high priest. Pressing her lips together, she replies that she agrees to join forces. She also understands that she will never forgive them, and the next morning, she wakes up and realizes that she secretly snuck into the secret meeting place last night. It was reckless, but the girl still doubts whether she fully understands what she must do now. She warms up, and feels that everything is fine with her physically. Her gaze falls on the key on the dresser, and she remembers that His Highness Sven gave her something before leaving. He said that since they were now accomplices, the key belonged to her, and explained that it was the key to his personal secret greenhouse in the palace. A further strategic meeting is scheduled to take place there. He asked her to come the next day at 3 o'clock and try to make sure no one noticed her. Before leaving, he kissed her hand and said that he would wait. And now the girl thinks that His Highness can be too pompous. But she still decides to trust him and stop the conspiracy at all costs. The heads of the clergy and Ariana, and after some time she is already looking for that very greenhouse. Approaching one of the buildings, she thinks that this is most likely it. The girl inserts the key and opens the door, realizing that His Highness should already be inside. She sees the prince sitting at the table with a cup of tea, and is slightly surprised. Shiji approaches Rua and says that they were waiting for her. His Highness welcomes the girl into his secret greenhouse and invites her to sit down. Rua sits down, Shiji pours her tea, and the prince explains that few people know about this place and that it has been his secret hideout since childhood. The main character cautiously asks if it is dangerous to show her such an important place. The prince replies that everything is fine and reminds them that they are accomplices. This means they must share their secrets, and Rua agrees, saying that she understands. He adds that since they are on the same side, she should speak more freely, and suggests that they maintain friendly relations from now on. The young lady asks if he is specifically talking about friendship, and the prince replies that she can use the greenhouse as she wishes, even just for reading in silence. He notices that she loves books, and the girl realizes that His Highness is very observant and has noticed her admiration for the library. She addresses him by name and says that she understands, after which he asks if they have a concrete plan, and the prince is happy to hear his name. He points to a paper on the table, and when Rua takes it, he asks if she knows this man. The girl looks and replies that yes, this is the same dissolute Viscount. Viscount Rose Redmond is known to everyone in aristocratic society, has become famous as a heartthrob, and boasts of countless love affairs. He is a talented orator and diplomat, but his bad reputation overshadows all his merits. The Viscount had a mother, but he grew up far from her because of her flighty nature, at least that's what the temple maid said. His Highness points to the portrait and says that he is the third aristocrat to enter into an alliance with the head of the clergy. Redmond's role is to use diplomatic skills to exchange rare goods with a Western country, with some of the cargo secretly transferred outside of the deal. Rua understands that these goods are intended for Yuan's family, and this is the payment for their help. The prince confirms that she understood everything correctly, but adds that there is one more detail. Magical beasts are tranquilized and hidden at the bottom of crates containing goods, thus secretly transporting them to the lands of the Empire. Rose Redmond is the one doing all this, and it's his fault that innocent people are suffering. Rua thinks she will never be able to forgive him, and the prince explains that if official documents about the deal are obtained, then everything can be revealed publicly. Then they will have evidence to expose the plan of the head of the clergy. The girl says that their task is to obtain these documents, and asks how they are going to do this. The prince shows an invitation with a blue seal, and announces that in the coming days a ball will be held at the Viscount's house in honor of his birthday, to which he has been invited as a representative of the royal family. Rua asks in surprise if he's planning on throwing a whole parade, and notes that if the rest of the family doesn't interfere, then he's really lucky. The young man laughs and says that she is right, and at that moment the main character notices an unusual decoration on Sven's ear. The prince asks what happened, but Rua is a little nervous and replies that nothing, only assuming that he is going to accept the invitation, and the young man confirms this. After this, he gets down on one knee and asks with a smile if she would like to go with him. Rua looks at his smug smile and realizes that he is exactly what she thought he was, but she still extends her hand. She says that if it will help her revenge, then she will gladly agree. Meanwhile, Galt sits alone near the temple. Suddenly, Ariana comes up to him from behind, covers his eyes and asks him to guess who it is. The young man asks with a smile if it is Ari, and admits that she scared him. The girl smiles and says that he recognized her immediately, because Galt loves her so much. He sheepishly replies that perhaps that is true, and Ariana says that she came to him with a very important question. She takes an invitation out of her pocket and offers to go to the ball together. Ariana explains that she received an invitation for her family to a celebration in honor of the Viscount's birthday. She assures that it will be luxurious and truly magnificent there. Galt hesitantly replies that he doesn't like such noisy events, and the girl immediately asks if he doesn't want to accompany her. She then adds that they should definitely go together and have a good time at the reception. The young man is embarrassed, but agrees since she wants it so much. At this moment, several knights approach them, and one of them, apologizing, turns to the commander. He reports that one of the soldiers injured his leg during the duel, and Galt immediately rises, demanding to see the wound. The commander says that the wound looks deep, and if something is not done urgently, the guy could lose his leg. Galt remarks that they are lucky, because Ariana is right nearby. He reminds her that if she saved him when he was on the verge of falling into eternal sleep, then such a wound would heal in an instant. The young man turns to Ari, asking for help, and around him one can hear words about how lucky they are to have the candidate for sainthood. Ariana realizes that Rua has been doing everything for her lately and she hasn't used her power in a long time. She thinks how tiresome it is, but also understands that it could improve her reputation, but she remembers how difficult it was to persuade Galt to go to the ball with her. The tired girl apologizes and says that she would really like to help, but she admits that she was very tired during the service today, and Galt notes with concern how hardworking she is. He suggests taking the wounded man to the temple and asking another candidate to help, and everyone agrees. Ariana adds that the wound is not too serious and the soldier will be fine. She immediately says that it's not that important because there's a ball coming up and she needs to choose a new dress, preferably together with Galt. The young man agrees, but thinks to himself whether the injury of her subordinate is really not important to her at all. However, he convinces himself that Ari is simply excited about the ball and is looking forward to it, thinking how sweet she is. The girl says that she also wants new jewelry, and the commander replies that he understands and they have a lot to buy when the high priest addresses them. Ariana notices that His Holiness is calling her, says goodbye to Galt, and says that they will see each other again. She reminds him not to forget about the agreement, and the guy silently watches her go. Meanwhile, the main character examines one of the dresses and realizes that there are only 5 days left until the ball. After deciding to go to the reception, she collected information about Redmond and completely forgot about her outfit because she had neither a dress nor jewelry. She recalls how Ariana once admired her beautiful ribbon. Rua then asked in surprise if this was true and told him that she had received a handmade ribbon from a woman she had healed. Ariana said that such a thing must be the only one in the world and added that she would like one too. When Rua noticed in surprise that Ari had untied the ribbon, she smiled and said that the color was too bright for her. She hinted that if Rua wore it, the other girls would start picking on her again. Rua didn't want to disturb Ariana and was afraid that such beauty could get dirty. So she decided it was better to remove the tape and give it to Ariana, to which she asked with a smile if she didn't mind. Ari immediately tied the ribbon on herself and asked if it suited her, and Rua just smiled and agreed. Now the girl understands that Ariana wore it only once and never again, simply wanting to take it for herself. Rua thinks about what to do next and decides that perhaps she should buy something in the city. She knows that candidates can receive temple funds if they apply, but the head of the clergy is responsible for this. And no matter how many applications she submitted, she never received approval, without understanding why. At that moment, someone suddenly bursts into her room, and Rua flinches. It turns out to be a maid who announces that a package has arrived for her from Mr. Shiji, and Rua asks in surprise if it's really him. The maid adds that the parcel is very heavy and she doesn't know what's inside. She grumbles why she has to carry things sent for Rua. After all, Mr. Shiji is popular among the maids, and she is clearly hinting at her desire to attract his attention. Rua notices that the maid is still being rude and briefly considers using her power, but stops herself. She asks the girl to wait. The maid angrily asks what they want from her, and Rua says that her words have offended both herself and Mr. Shiji. She demands an apology, and the maid indignantly replies that she doesn't understand why. Rua calmly explains that Mr. Shiji is loyal to Sven, and such words offend them both. The maid justifies herself by saying that she didn't want to humiliate Shiji, but only to offend Rua. Rua remarks that the maid has gone too far and should remember who she is talking to. She reminds her that she is just a servant, serving the candidates for sainthood, and she should know her place. The maid is angry, but still bows and asks for forgiveness, after which she leaves. Left alone, Rua realizes that she simply put her in her place. She opens the suitcase, deciding to see what they gave her. Inside is everything from shoes to a dress and accessories, and along with the outfit, a letter falls out. The letter said that the dress was sent to her immediately after it was sewn. Sven commissioned a well-known tailor from the capital, apologized for the surprise, and hoped that the jewelry would be to her taste. Rua smiles but notices the continuation of the letter. It says that, having learned about her endless work, he obtained a long leave for her through government agencies. The document is official, and if anyone objects, she just needs to show the permit and rest easy. The girl thinks that Sven has taken care of everything and seems to be able to solve any problem. She examines the shoes and jewelry, noting their elegance, but notices the absence of earrings. Rua goes to the closet and takes out a box with her earrings. Opening it, she sees only one earring, bequeathed by her mother. The second one disappeared a long time ago, the day she healed the boy with bruises on his legs. Then, looking at her reflection, she realized that the earring was gone. Rua was on the verge of tears then, and now only hopes that everything is okay with that boy. It was the first time she used her power outside of her family, shortly after they had fallen into eternal sleep. Returning from her walk, she found it was already late. Now looking at the earring in her hand, Rua understands that this is all that remains of her mother. Having put it on, she feels that she is no longer powerless and will do everything to bring their plan to fruition. The day of the ball arrives, and Sven, by virtue of his status, arrives first, having prepared a carriage for Rua. Shiji notices her condition and asks if everything is okay. She replies that everything is fine, and he reminds her that he is responsible for her safety. Rua nods, thinking that Shiji was always like this, reserved and silent. Looking out the window at the moon hidden by clouds, she feels an uneasy premonition. Soon the carriage stops and Rua gets out, greeted by the prince. Sven says he was waiting for her, and the girl remarks how majestic he looks. She even feels a little awkward standing next to him, but he smiles and says that he was right. He notes that she looks especially beautiful in this dress and jewelry. And he adds that he matched everything to the color of her hair, for which Rua thanks him. She jokes that there is no point in flattering because her hair did not turn white from birth. She asks him with a smile if he finds this transition strange. The prince pauses for a moment and then asks if he was talking about strangeness. He takes a strand of her hair and says that those who think this is strange are simply blind. This was proof of her strength after all the pain she had endured. Now the young lady can be proud of it and no longer see it as a cause for shame. She can't believe he attached such deep meaning to it. His words bring tears to her eyes because before, her hair was only the subject of ridicule and mockery. The guy invites her to take a closer look and says the shade matches his complexion perfectly. He even jokes that they could almost be called a couple. He adds that if you think about it this way, then she also looks harmonious with Shiji. Shiji, hearing this, is at a loss for words. He just smiles awkwardly, looking at Rua. He then asks Sven not to push him into a corner. His Highness is surprised, but approaches the young lady. He notes that she finally laughed in front of him and smiles back. The guy extends his hand to her and asks if it's time to go. Rua takes his hand and agrees. They leave together, and Shiji, looking after them, quietly wishes them luck in the battle. As they enter the ballroom, the prince addresses Rua. He points to one man and says that it is Viscount Redmond, whom he has already greeted. The prince notes that, although he appears frivolous, he is actually quite perceptive. He also confirms that the rumors about the Viscount's weakness for women are true. Rua replies that she would like to come closer, but His Highness asks her to take her time and wait for the right moment. The girl agrees. At this moment, another man approaches them and asks with surprise if this is really His Highness Sven, and whether he was able to attend such an important day. Sven answers affirmatively and mentions that he hasn't seen the Duke in a while. Rua looks around and realizes there are too many nobles around, so he decides to act independently. She realizes she needs to look around the room first, and her gaze falls on one of the waitresses. The girl looks tired and clearly worried about something, as if she is carrying heavy thoughts within her. Rua approaches her, deciding to start with this girl. But suddenly a loud voice rings out, surprised by her appearance. Rua immediately recognizes Ariana's voice. Galt stands next to her. Ariana confirms with a smile that it is indeed Rua, and expresses surprise at meeting her in such a place. Rua realizes they haven't spoken since the betrayal. She wonders if they're really going to act as if nothing happened. Ariana asks why Rua is here and if she is alone, since it seems she doesn't have a partner. With a smile, she asks if Rua is lonely at such a big reception. She turns to Galt for confirmation, and he replies, confused, that such people exist here. Rua calmly says that she came at the invitation thanks to connections and, of course, not alone. Ariana intriguedly asks what she means and where her companion is, while commenting on the excessively white color of her hair. She adds that in this light, Rua looks like an old woman. The girl can barely contain her irritation, realizing whose fault it is that she's become like this. She remembers His Highness and forces herself to calm down. Rua smiles and replies that she likes the current color even better than the previous one. Ariana just sighs, finding it boring. Galt puts his hand on Ariana's shoulder and suggests that she leave, believing that there is no point in enduring the ridicule. Rua is surprised to see that Galt actually understands everything. But Ariana loudly declares that she has not yet made sure whether Rua has come with a partner, and she wants to see it. She asks if it was the same man who gave her the dress and jewelry. Noticing the earrings, Ariana reaches closer, wanting to examine them, and Rua mentally asks her not to touch. Rua closes her eyes, not knowing what will happen next. At that very moment, someone pulls her towards him and apologizes for leaving her alone. It turns out to be His Highness, who greets Ariana Torbiaz and the commander of the Knights, asking if this is their first meeting. He recalls that he seemed to see the commander at the initiation ceremony. Galt bows in shock and apologizes for the late greeting. Sven replies that formalities can be dispensed with today. Ariana introduces herself and says she's seeing him for the first time. She asks in surprise if His Highness really came with Ruya. The prince confirms this, clarifying that they are not engaged. Ariana wonders what connects the second prince and the orphan candidate. Sven puts his hand on Rua's shoulder and calmly explains that she is indeed an orphan who previously lived in the Baron's house. He says that her parents fell into eternal sleep early and she was forced to live in the temple. He adds that he learned about this while helping orphans and candidates for sainthood. Therefore, he offered her cooperation in a program to support the disadvantaged and invited her to a ball as a sign of gratitude. He asks Rua if this is true, and she confirms, realizing that Sven had prepared a plausible explanation in advance. Rua notices that the conversation has attracted attention but hasn't aroused suspicion. One of the women is discussing a white-haired girl. Women recall the notorious illness of her parents and express regret. They note that she has become a candidate for sainthood, and that the prince's involvement in charity improves his image. Rua realizes that everything went exactly as Sven planned. She realizes that along the way, he has also strengthened his reputation. Ariana falls silent, then smiles and calls His Highness's actions noble. She adds that she would like to get to know him better in the future. The prince politely agrees. Ariana returns to Galt and invites him to dance to his favorite tune. She says goodbye to Sven and says that they will see each other again. Galt hurries after her and asks her to wait. But Sven stops him, putting his hand on his shoulder. He praises Galt's father and says that his son's skill is in no way inferior, as are his exploits. Galt is embarrassed and says that His Highness should not speak like that. Sven adds that the guy is a bit naive and clearly doesn't have the best understanding of ladies. Galt is surprised, but the prince only smiles. After this, Sven returns to Rua and says that it is time for them to go. Ariana, watching everything, nervously bites her nail and decides not to leave it like this. After some time, she is already dancing with her husband. Meanwhile, Sven asks Rua to dance. She replies that dancing isn't her strong suit. He says with feigned sadness that he would like to dance with her, and Rua promises to agree if a familiar melody sounds. Sven clarifies whether this is true, and reminds her that he is looking forward to dancing with her. He jokes about his power as the second prince, and Rua asks what he means. He laughs, but Rua's gaze suddenly catches on that same maid. She notices a knife in the waitress's hands and becomes wary. Rua brings this to Sven's attention. The prince agrees it's dangerous, and suggests the girl has an agenda. As the waitress approaches the Viscount, Rua realizes the moment is dangerous. Sven decides to stop her, and the waitress agrees. The waitress desperately says that she must put this man into eternal sleep, even at the cost of her own life. Sven intercepts her hand and takes the knife, apologizing and saying that it is an inappropriate item. The girl, shocked, asks why he did it. Sven asks her to be quiet. He says that if this is an assassination attempt, then there is no need to make a fuss. The prince notes the strangeness of her behavior and asks her to explain what is happening. After a while, they go outside and the girl introduces herself as Charlotte Mail. She says that she came from the village and served in Redmond's house. She needed money for her family, and for 2 years everything was calm. She was planning to get married and leave the service. Sven asks who her fiancé was. Charlotte says it was Alan, a childhood friend who opened a bakery on the outskirts of the capital. They meet by chance in the city, and Sven asks if this is the same bakery they are talking about. He remembers Viola's bakery and says he has been there. He praises the cream buns, and Charlotte asks, amazed, how he knows this place. Sven explains that as a child he would sneak around the city, hiding his identity. He says he wanted to know the lives of ordinary people. Charlotte admits that they dreamed of getting married and running the shop together. But when she told him of her plans, Redmond called her to his office. He pushed her onto the bed and Rua reacted in horror. Charlotte says she resisted, but he hit her and forced her. He justified himself with orders and humiliated her with words. She ends her story with tears. Rua calls the Viscount a scoundrel, and Sven asks if she told anyone. Charlotte says she confessed to Alan, and the marks of the beating confirmed her words. Alan went angrily to demand justice, despite her requests. Redmond just laughed and used his power against him. He closed Alan's bakery, and Rua understands the kind of person they were dealing with. She could never forgive the head of the clergy for siding with such a man. Therefore, His Highness is now wondering if this is why the girl decided to enter into eternal sleep. The young lady confidently claimed she'd worked there before, meaning it wouldn't have been difficult to get into the office. She wasn't worried about the price, as she was planning to put Redmond into eternal sleep and was even prepared to say goodbye to life. She adds that, fortunately, she and Alan weren't married yet. This means he wouldn't have anything to do with the case, and without her, he could have gotten his business back. And that same beloved bakery. The thought of it makes the girl scream, saying she'd give anything just to make it all right. Then the main character gently asks Charlotte not to cry and assures her that they have the same goal and that she will be taken care of too. After this, the young lady turns to Sven and asks what he thinks about all this. He replies that if her words are true, he will also make every effort, as he would be ashamed to pass by a crying girl. The protagonist says that this is exactly the answer she expected. In her mind, she only wishes for Redmond to wait, because all his sins will surely come back to haunt him. At that moment, the girl returns to the hall with His Highness, and the boy notices that even though Charlotte was sent home, that's not all. After all, Rua is too sympathetic and kind, to the very depths of her soul. For this reason, she even risked changing their plan. The young lady asks with a grin who was it who recently said that they would just leave the crying girl. She then confidently states that they will get close enough to Redmond to obtain the necessary documents without any problems. And in her free time, she'll try to figure out what can be done about Charlotte's situation. His Highness clarifies whether she really intends to do this in her free time. He understands that this comes from the heart, but he still fears that her kindness might hinder her revenge. However, these are just his personal doubts. At this moment, the girl hears a familiar melody and happily says that it is a falsetto for Saints, her favorite piece. The prince immediately grabs her hand and pulls her along. The protagonist is surprised and asks Sven what's going on. The guy just smiles and reminds her that she promised him a dance, after which he says it's time to go. Soon they are dancing together, and the whole hall looks at them with admiration. The guests whisper among themselves, praising His Highness Sven's dance, adding that the girl from the family of Baron Ristado also holds herself beautifully. One of the women remarks that Miss Tobias and the Knight Commander are not bad either. True, not as refined. Ariana only snorts in displeasure in response. Galt turns to the girl and asks if everything is all right. The young lady turns around and replies with a smile that everything is fine. She simply says that she felt something unpleasant, like there were bugs crawling under her feet. The guy looks at his bride, puzzled, not understanding what she's talking about. At this time, His Highness turns to Rua, praises her dance, and asks why she has such a face and why she doesn't smile. The main character replies that she can't. She hasn't danced in too long and is very nervous. But when the girl turns around, the prince notices an earring in her ear. He immediately realizes it's exactly the same as his. The prince smiles, realizing that this earring originally belonged to her. A moment comes to mind, as he sat on a bench, all wounded, realizing how bad everything was and how unlucky he was. Then he secretly went out into the city, and everything was calm until he got into an unpleasant situation with a stranger. He managed to fight them off and escape, and then he realized he was still too young for this. Besides, he knew that if he didn't return to the palace in time, everyone would start to worry. He recalled the words he'd heard in the palace. He was considered an unwanted second prince, and his mother's second birth had been far more difficult than the first, causing her to lose too much of the red fluid. Even the court saint could not save her, and the mother fell into eternal sleep. The young man was left in a world where everyone felt disgust for the unwanted prince. His older brother whispered to him that his red eyes were supposedly the same red liquid sucked from his mother. The young man knew this was complete nonsense. But no one doubted that the throne would go to the eldest. He wasn't interested in power, but being rejected simply because of his birth was unbearable, and he decided to prove his strength. He had made this decision a long time ago and wanted to prove to his brother how wrong he was, so he went out into the city more and more often. Thoughts of his loneliness did not go away, and now he felt that he was simply tired. Suddenly, someone called out to him and asked if he was okay. It was a young lady, and the boy asked who she was. The girl looked at his wound and said that he must be in a lot of pain, and then offered to heal him. She warned that it might be painful, but she could handle it. The young man wondered if she possessed the powers of a candidate for sainthood, and why then was she talking about pain? He decided that there was no need for this, because he would soon meet the servant and would be able to return, and such bruises were not worth worrying about. But the main character immediately objected that it was worth it, and that she was really worried. She said she wanted him to get better, and touching his feet, promised to help. After which, she began to use her power. Having healed him, she said that everything was fine now, remembered that she needed to hurry home, and added that it was time for her to go. She said goodbye and asked him to take care of himself. Only later did the young man realize he had never learned her name, even though no one had ever treated him so warmly before. It was the first time. Then the boy felt as if he had been saved by a real goddess. Looking at the ground, he noticed an earring that belonged to that girl. Picking her up, he thought that perhaps they would meet again. The prince understood that that meeting had become a source of strength for him. From then on, no one dared call him an unwanted child. He gained power for this, but he had no clue how to find that girl, until he learned of the temple's dark side and offered to become her ally. He always doubted it was she, but deep down, he hoped so. And this girl really turned out to be the one who saved him then, and he had dreamed of meeting her for many years. Rua turns to him and notices that he looks very happy. The prince smiles and replies that she seems right. He remembers how the girl took his pain for herself back then, and he understands that she still holds that same kindness in her heart, but if that kindness gets in the way of her revenge, then he would be the one who would dirty his hands in her stead. While he was searching for her, the young lady had suffered too many wounds, so now he will become her support. And also, with a sword and shield. He decides that she will stay by his side until the end, and their dance comes to an end. The ladies in the audience immediately start applauding, saying it was wonderful. Another voice joins in the clapping, calling the dance magnificent. He adds that His Highness is incredibly talented. It turns out to be the Viscount, who smirkingly calls the prince an impudent fellow. He says that he is next to such a beautiful white lily, and his gaze slides down the young lady's chest. The Viscount asks why he shouldn't introduce her. The protagonist notices his insolent gaze and realizes she'll have to assume the role of a courtesan. She wonders if this is really the easiest way. The Viscount says that the girl is not engaged to His Highness, and such flowers always have a dangerous charm, something that makes her want to pick them. The man takes her by the chin and says he wants to know the name of the white lily. At that moment, someone's hand falls on top of his hand, asking him to put it down. The prince calmly says that the girl is not his fiancée, but today she is his partner. He makes it clear that there's no point in interfering further. The young lady tells the prince that everything is fine and she can handle it herself. The guy asks in surprise what she's even talking about. The girl approaches the Viscount and apologizes with a smile for not introducing herself earlier. She gives her name, Rua Ristato, and the man is slightly embarrassed. The main character adds that she came at the invitation of His Highness Sven, but doubts whether she is suitable as his partner, since she is only an escort. Besides, she would prefer a more intimate relationship. Inside, she feels the urge to hurt him right now, but she knows it's too early. The Viscount smirks and clarifies what kind of close relationship he is talking about. The young lady whispers in his ear, offering to stay alone later and asking if he would like a birthday present. The man grins and says he can't refuse, inviting her to come to his room after the next melody. He kisses her hand and invites her to enjoy some time alone. The young lady leaves, realizing that everything worked out. She admits to herself how difficult it is to pretend to be in love, and she remembers how she worried about whether she was attractive enough for this. Then she looks at the prince's face and asks what happened and why his smile is so scary. His Highness asks her to extend her hand first. She does so, asking why, and the prince replies that he will erase the touch of that idiot. He starts rubbing her hand vigorously, and the girl thinks that he will rub a hole in it. The guy asks where she learned to do that. The main character replies that she simply imitated the girls around Redmond. The prince remarks that leaving him aside and being alone with Redmond was not part of their plan. The young lady counters that an affair could work to their advantage, as it would lower his guard, and it would be easier to use the ability on a naked body. His Highness wants to object, but restrains himself. He just says that he's finished, and the girl looks at her clean hands and thanks him. The prince reminds her that she is not someone who needs to be protected, but asks her to be on guard when she enters Redmond's room, promising to wait nearby. In case something goes wrong, he asks if they've reached an agreement. The young lady confidently replies yes and asks him to trust her, then smiles. She adds that she is not a saint at all, but a real villain. After some time, the main character knocks on the Viscount's bedroom door, and he allows her to enter. The girl apologizes for the intrusion, and, looking around, realizes that this is definitely Redmond's bedroom. She sees a man sitting on the bed, and thinks that the documents are most likely in another room, which means she needs to find out everything first. The man says he knew she would intrigue him. He takes a sip of wine and pours another glass, inviting you to join him. The main character politely declines, saying she doesn't drink. The guy asks if this is true. Then he pulls her hand and says that if so there is no point in beating around the bush, and it is better to clarify everything right away before having fun. The man asks her what her true goal is, and the protagonist is stunned. A thought flashes through her mind. Has he really figured it all out? Meanwhile, Shiji is walking the perimeter of the estate, deciding to do some reconnaissance just in case. He doesn't notice anything suspicious and begins to wonder how His Highness Sven and Mrs. Rua are doing. He understands that in case of danger, he needs to act immediately. But suddenly, he notices someone's figure. The boy thinks it's Ms. Torbiaz, but he can't see who's next to her. The robe obscures her silhouette, but her height makes it clear. It's not the commander. CG realizes that Mrs. Torbiaz has slipped away from the reception for a secret meeting. The place looks like a warehouse, and he doesn't understand what they're doing there. By the time the possible meaning of what's happening dawns on him, it's too late. Looking back, he realizes he's missed them. Shiji breaks into a run, realizing that if his guess is correct, disaster will strike. He must warn His Highness and Lady Rua immediately. Meanwhile, the young lady asks the Viscount what exactly he means. The man tells her not to pretend and asks her directly what she wants: wealth, status, or patronage. The girl sighs quietly, realizing he hasn't revealed their plan. That means she needs to give him an answer. At that moment, she realizes that the Viscount is holding her wrist tightly. The man demands an answer, and the girl sees his true nature. To use the ability, she needs to touch his bare skin. More precisely, she needs to touch it with her palm. She understands that she needs to lower his guard and free her hand. With a smile, she tells him exactly what she wants. She says she wants an emotional lift from the Viscount. The man asks again, and the girl adds that, as a candidate for sainthood, she knows how exhausting life in the temple can be. It's like an internal numbness. That's why she lacks emotions, and next to the Viscount, she can afford it without consequences. She asks if that's not true. The Viscount bursts out laughing, calling it a flaw, and admires the fact that before him is a dissolute saint. He says it's no wonder a woman like Charlotte resisted. But that's exactly the kind of woman he wanted. The young lady asks if he's talking about Charlotte. The man replies that she's a former servant, faithful to her fiancé. He adds that she only fell silent after a few blows. The body was in good shape until her fiancé showed up. The Viscount speaks with contempt of the commoner, and the main character understands how disgusting he is. She decides that her revenge will be merciless and says that she is not like Charlotte. The Viscount lets go of her hands and begins to tear at her dress, asking if she will entertain him. The main character puts her hand on his shoulder and calmly replies that they will definitely have fun. The moment she uses her power, the Viscount feels a terrible itch. Spots appear on his back and he begins to scratch furiously, screaming from the itching. The girl says the poison mixed into the wine has begun to take effect. It's just an itch for now, but the condition will worsen. She adds that she won't give him an antidote, and in a few minutes he will fall into eternal sleep. The man goes into shock. The protagonist realizes it's a bluff, but the symptoms do indeed resemble skin conditions she's treated before. Itching is not life-threatening if you think about it rationally. She couldn't have added poison, but the pain was so severe that the Viscount was unable to think clearly. He begs her to stop and give him an antidote. The young lady says he has documents about trade with the West. The man is amazed that she knows about this. She demands to know where they are. The Viscount refuses, and the girl coldly remarks that nothing can be done. She says she didn't mean to take his life, but in this case, she'll have to. Panicked, he points to the next room. She asks where exactly the documents are. The man replies that they're in his office, in a locked drawer. The key is hidden behind a painting. He screams again from the itch and asks for an antidote, but the girl realizes it doesn't exist. Then she takes out a piece of paper and says that's not all. She needs a stamp and a signature. She places the sheet of paper into the Viscount's trembling hands. After reading the text, the man, shocked, asks what kind of absurdity this is. The girl explains that this is a bill for compensation for damages to Charlotte Mail. She realizes that the document was hastily compiled by Sven. He even asked if it was worth adding another 0. Or maybe even 2. The Viscount shouts that this is nonsense in compensation for a simple servant. Seeing the amount, he is astonished by its size. The young lady adds that the pressure on her fiancé's shop is also included in the compensation. And that's not all. She discovered that there were many victims, and some of them became pregnant and were then thrown out onto the streets. She says it would be right to allocate funds for the upbringing of these children. In comparison, Charlotte's words are only a small part of the picture. The girl remarks that life should not be measured by wealth and asks what he thinks. The Viscount scolds her, and she demands that he quickly put the seal and signature on it. Eventually, the man complies and hands her the signed document. He asks if she got what she wanted. The main character checks the papers and answers yes. The man immediately demands the antidote. The girl calmly says that he doesn't exist. The Viscount looks at her in horror, and she says that he will slowly sink into eternal sleep, regretting what he did. She leaves the room, saying goodbye to Viscount Redmond, and adds that the night was disgusting. The man screams at her not to leave. His body itches unbearably, and he begs her not to put him into eternal sleep. He eventually loses consciousness. The young lady thinks she may have frightened him too much. It seemed the fear overcame the itch, and he lost consciousness. She thought contemptuously of how pathetic he was. But the main thing is that everything is settled with Charlotte. All that remains is to pick up the documents about the deal with the West. His Highness meets her at the exit, praises her, and says that he is glad to see her safe and sound. The girl notices he's arrived, and Sven replies that everything went well. Then he suddenly notices her dress. He throws his cape over her and asks her to cover herself, saying that this is Redmond's doing. The prince calls him terrible and asks what to do with him. The girl replies that she's already figured it out. She says that they urgently need to pick up the documents from the next room. His Highness asks her to take better care of herself, but the girl sheepishly says that it was indecent. She apologizes, but the prince becomes embarrassed and says that he meant something else. He then adds that he made sure everything was clear. Looking after him, the main character thinks that he is strange and does not understand what this clearly means. They enter the right room, and the girl says that the key is behind the painting, and the documents are in the desk drawer. They find the key, open the chest of drawers, and take the papers. The prince says that this time he was not the main character, and the goal was achieved thanks to her. He folds the documents and hides them, and the girl hurries him away. At that moment, Shiji runs into the room. He shouts that he knew they were still here. The prince is surprised and asks why he's so disheveled. Shiji apologizes and says that he has an urgent report. He witnessed Mrs. Torbis's secret meeting with someone near the warehouse. The protagonist wonders if it's Ariana. Shiji suggests that the man is from the Yuan clan and has been in hiding all this time. He's talking about magical beasts being transported into the country. If they were in Redmond's warehouse, then things are bad. At that moment, screams are heard. The protagonist asks what happened. Shiji furiously replies that her worst fears have been confirmed. His Highness and the girl go out onto the terrace and see people running in terror. A huge monster appears in the center of the hall. The main character screams that this is Ariana's doing and tries to understand the purpose of everything that is happening. She notices Ariana, who is watching the chaos with a smile. The girl realizes that the attack by the magical beasts was part of the head of the clergy's plan. By healing the wounded, the temple will gain trust. Even if aristocrats are loyal to the crown, the temple's influence can raise concerns and lead to exposure. Ariana had chosen the estate to attack in advance, and the Viscount's house was not the original target. She says with a smile that the nobility has gathered here today, and it would be a sin to miss such a chance. But because the animals were hidden in the Viscount's warehouse, everything didn't go according to plan, and she would have to apologize to him. She then orders her beast to attack, but asks not to put people into eternal sleep, because then she will have to heal them if she wants to. She adds that everything is possible except attacking the white-haired girl. The blonde recalls a conversation with the one who controls the monster, and how she clarified whether he would be able to direct his cruelty at only one target. She smiles, enjoying what is happening, and thinks about the pathetic and smug Rua. Ariana believes that she could be a useful toy, and then she would be allowed to live. But now she's screaming, ordering the monster to tear this idiot to pieces. Galt shouts for everyone to remain calm, not panic, and run. He announces that the main entrance is blocked and they need to evacuate through the back. But the monster's roar only increases the panic, and the aristocrats rush about in terror. The boy realizes that panic is preventing evacuation. If he had a sword, he would fight the beast. But Ari said the sword was not suitable for the reception, and he blamed himself for not insisting. He decides to find Ari, who disappeared during the chaos, and hopes that she is alive. The protagonist descends the stairs, sees the commotion, and screams that there will be too many casualties. This is all Ariana's doing. His Highness notes that she acted without the slightest hesitation. He then turns to Shiji, who immediately addresses the prince. Shiji says that he has prepared everything in advance and hands him the sword. The prince notes with surprise that it's his favorite blade, which he left behind in the carriage. Shiji replies that he was just heading there and took the sword with him, just in case. His Highness grins and says that, as expected, his trusted subordinate will help him out in a difficult moment. At this point, the heroine loses her temper and asks if he really intends to fight this creature, as it's extremely dangerous. The prince confidently replies that he is quite good in battle and will not yield even to the commander of the knightly order. Sven then turns to Shiji and asks if he has a weapon. The boy confirms without hesitation that of course he does. His Highness commands that the Yuan clan member be found. If he controls the magical beast, then he's still somewhere in the estate. He adds that upon discovery, he must be arrested immediately. Shiji replies that he will carry out the order without delay. After this, the man turns to Rua and asks her to take the documents and leave. The girl takes the papers, but says that she can't just run away alone. Sven calmly replies that she is smart enough to understand that this is the best solution. Rua agrees, but immediately realizes she'll only be a hindrance in such a fight. Besides, Ariana is clearly on the side of the Yuan clan member, meaning she might give the order to attack her specifically. The girl is certain that Ariana will do just that. Rua understands that she might not be able to use it against her, but it's still worth testing the potential of her power. His Highness, meanwhile, realizes that Shiji will take on a person from the Yuan clan, and Rua will be out of danger. However, looking at the monster, he thinks about how to defeat this behemoth. He notices that the commander is helping people leave the hall, but the evacuation is going with difficulty. It is impossible to swing a sword among the crowd, and the prince decides that he must first lead the beast into an open space, away from people. At this point, Rua asks Sven to wait, and says that she has a plan. He exclaims in shock that she needs to run away immediately. But the girl confidently replies that she won't leave and asks him to listen to her. Rua lays out her plan, and His Highness, shocked, asks if she's in her right mind. He can't allow her to put himself in danger. Then the young lady puts her finger to his lips and says that if she were in her right mind, she would not be here with everyone else. Sven takes her hand and tells her that she always exceeds his expectations. After a short pause, he agrees and states that he understands her idea and is ready to follow the plan. Rua thanks him for his trust. They both acknowledge that Sven simply wants to play a key role as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Galt moves down the corridor and realizes that Ari hasn't appeared during the entire evacuation. He hopes she's already left. At this moment, one of the women trips over the hem of her dress and falls. The monster, noticing her, remembers the blonde's order to attack the white-haired lady. He growls and prepares to attack. Galt rushes towards the woman, trying to pull her away, and asks her to be careful. But the young lady suddenly says that the beast needs to attack not this woman, but her. The monster immediately turns its gaze to Rua. Galt, terrified, screams at her to run. The girl realizes that everything worked as expected. The beast reacts specifically to white hair, and the Yuan clan man truly is capable of controlling magical creatures. However, the animals themselves don't distinguish between people. If Ariana orders an attack, she'll only specify hair color. Rua guesses this because she knows Ariana's mind well, as they were once friends. His Highness notes that Rua saved him by drawing the monster away. At that moment, he delivers a precise blow to the beast's neck, causing it to roar. Rua then touches the monster and uses her ability. The beast whines pitifully and collapses to the floor. Looking at her hand, Rua realizes it worked. The transference of intoxication symptoms affected even the magical creature. This time, she gave him a severe hangover. His Highness turns to Rua and tells her the plan was a success. She was the bait, and he merely completed the task. In essence, she subdued the monster. He then adds that everything went exactly as they planned. Rua replies that it was only possible because he trusted her. The hall erupts in applause. People say that His Highness Sven has tamed the beast, and that's exactly what they expected of him. Many also admire the bravery of the girl who became the bait. Galt watches what is happening and suddenly catches himself thinking that Rua somehow reminds him of Miss Ristado. Ariana is furious. She realizes the plan has failed, and she's irritated by how useless these monsters are. A new thought is born in her head. It's time to move on to Plan B. The Yuan clan man who controlled the beast watches in shock. He doesn't understand why the creature is no longer moving and realizes he must leave immediately. At that very moment, a sword is pressed to his neck, and a cold voice tells him that he will not be able to escape. It turns out to be Sir Shiji. He declares that, by order of His Highness, he will not allow him to leave, and advises him to confess whose instructions he was acting on. As the audience continues to applaud, one of the men notices that the girl's hair color is different. He asks in surprise if it's Miss Rua. The incident with the magical beast at Redmond's ball was unrelated, with only a few people suffering minor injuries, so the matter was kept under wraps. The Yuan clan member who controlled the beast was captured. It was also established that Redmond was one of the perpetrators of the magical creature's attacks. This information was made public to the aristocracy and supported by documentary evidence. The Viscount was arrested on the spot. If the existence of a behind-the-scenes mastermind were revealed, the crimes of the head of the clergy and his associates could no longer be hidden forever. Now Rua sits at the table and says the irony of fate is astonishing. The carriage carrying Redmond and the man from the Yuan clan was attacked by bandits, and one of the men was plunged into an eternal sleep. Redmond himself survived, but lost his mind. Now in prison, he's no different from a mentally disabled person, unable to string together even a few words. Rua understands that her threats alone weren't the deciding factor. Her ability was merely intimidation, but this time he genuinely believed in the idea of entering eternal sleep and broke down. Now the girl thinks about the enemy who managed to escape and understands that the head of the clergy was probably behind this. The prince agrees with this, but notes that he is alarmed by how quickly everything happened. He suggests that Ms. Torbius may have prepared mercenaries in advance as a backup plan in case of failure. Rua thinks Ariana is still as treacherous as ever. Shiji blames himself for not accompanying the carriage personally, considering it his own mistake. He bows and begs forgiveness, but His Highness replies that they did the right thing by avoiding direct involvement, even if the laurels went to the knights. There's still one more member of the Yuan clan left. The possibility of him appearing at some meeting still exists, and excluding Shiji from the mission was a deliberate decision. So Shiji shouldn't worry. He did everything right. The boy replies that he understands, although he believes that His Highness did not need to console him. The prince adds that the attacks of magical creatures must cease for a while, since they have thwarted one of the enemy's plans. Rua agrees and notes that Charlotte received money from the confiscation of Redmond's property. Everything went as planned. It also emerged that Redmond's wife and son had no involvement in his affairs and had moved to the woman's family estate, escaping poverty. The girl thinks that there is at least something good in this, smiles weakly, and asks who will be their next enemy. She clarifies whether they will deal with the next aristocrat who collaborated with the head of the clergy. The prince replies that he would like to, but first his father extended an invitation. He wishes to see Rua for an audience. The girl understands that they are talking about His Majesty the King, and in shock asks again if this is true. Meanwhile, Ariana is angry in her room, beating her pillow and screaming about how disgusting it all is. She realizes the magical beast's attack has failed. Even though the mercenaries managed to defeat the attack on the carriage, His Holiness scolded her and ordered her to remain quiet for a while. Ariana wonders if he's mad at her, then snaps, claiming it's not her fault and it's all Rua's fault. She didn't expect Rua to act so boldly and willingly become bait. And now everyone is applauding her, praising her as a heroine. The blonde becomes even more angry, considering Rua a defective holy orphan, and thinks of her with hatred. Then she falls onto the bed and contemplates letting Galt pamper her. There's something pleasant about that. Especially if you remember how he talked to her after the ball, as if he was in the clouds. In irritation, Ariana exclaims that she herself is ready to plunge into eternal sleep out of anger. At this moment, a maid enters the room, apologizes, and says that she has brought a message from the head of the clergy. Ariana jumps up abruptly and asks what he's talking about, hoping he's finally forgiven her. The maid replies that the message concerns the annual celebration that will take place in the coming days. The girl remembers this holiday. It's a gathering of female candidates for sainthood. Perhaps she has another chance, and she's asking for clarification. At this time, Sven's older brother is sitting at his desk. He looks at one of the documents and realizes that it is a report on the incident at Viscount Redmond's estate. It says Sven played a key role. The older brother winces and wearily thinks that this guy has distinguished himself again. A man enters the room and apologizes for interrupting Mr. Sarid's work. He turns to Diana and asks what happened. The woman starts to speak, but noticing the expression on his face, asks him to stop frowning so much. She says that with such a look he will scare away all his subjects and suggests that he smile, at the same time asking why not follow the example of his younger brother. Sarid coldly asks if she really thinks he is more suitable to be the next ruler. The green-haired lady replies that she said nothing of the sort and asks him to stop being so gloomy. She reminds him that she is his fiancée. Sarid only turns away and falls silent. Diana asks to hear something else and says that tomorrow a girl will arrive, a candidate for sainthood, who, together with his brother, sorted out that incident. Sarid replies gloomily that he is looking forward to the meeting with such a famous person. And Diana adds that Lewis is the one who is most looking forward to meeting her. Sarid notes that it seems that Mrs. Rua is really important to him. At this time, the high priest is throwing papers around in his office and angrily says that Ariana is a capricious girl. He resents her for doing whatever comes into her head and wonders if she's about to derail his carefully laid plans. One of the servants tries to calm him down and says that Ariana has already solved the problem by sending mercenaries. The high priest angrily replies that she did it for money. Another priest adds that the annual ceremony will take place soon, and after that, the girl will obediently follow all instructions. The man replies that if that's the case, everything will be perfect. That's why he should nominate this naughty girl. The red-haired man agrees, but thinks to himself that he could not imagine that His Highness Sven and Rua would be able to tame the magical beast. He believes that it is highly likely that the prince found out about his plan, and Rua most likely just happened to be nearby. Be that as it may, Redmond has become useless, and the magical beasts will no longer be used. The priest understands that, no matter how much he might wish otherwise, for the sake of speeding up the plan, he will have to neglect some details. At that moment, someone enters the office, apologizes, and asks if the head of the clergy is still there. This person turns out to be Galt. The priest turns to the commander and immediately asks what brought him here. The young man replies that he would like to ask a few questions about a candidate for sainthood. The man interrupts him and asks if it's urgent. Galt replies that there is nothing urgent. Then the priest apologizes, says that he is busy now, and suggests discussing everything another day, after which he says goodbye and sends him out. Galt, seeing the closed doors, understands that nothing can be done if he is busy. The boy realizes that he actually wanted to know more about Rua Ristato. He wonders if the girl is really as terrible as Ariana says. After all, she behaved with dignity then, even beautifully, but the young man immediately shakes his head and convinces himself that he cannot think that way. As he passes the window, he pauses to look and again finds himself thinking about Lady Ristato. At this time, the main character walks down the corridor and cannot believe that the day of the audience has finally arrived. She is sure that His Majesty only wants to reward her for her help in the incident at the Redmond estate, because Sven said that everything would be exactly like that. Besides, he gave her a dress for the reception again, and the girl thinks, how can this not make her happy? However, the feeling of being watched from all sides unnerves her a little. The maids whisper whether she is the same Rua Ristato who fought the magical beast. They admire her for defeating such a fearsome creature and remark on how well the dress looks on her. The men also discuss her, recalling Duchess Peridot's words about the girl saving her life, and adding that the feat of the candidate and His Highness Sven is discussed at many receptions. The young lady thinks the rumors aren't that bad, but she wonders if the other candidates feel uncomfortable with the attention being directed at her. One of the men confidently says that this year at the ceremony in honor of the goddess Rush, she will become the Princess of Roses. The main character understands that the ceremony is very close. She recalls that this is an annual national celebration in honor of Rush's birthday, where the main figure is supposed to be the saint, but now the place is empty. Therefore, the two best candidates are chosen, one from the temple and one from the royal family, and they are called the Rose Princesses of the Year. The girl knows that the title is connected to Rush's love of roses, which is why the temple has a rose garden where candidates can relax. The people also eagerly await this holiday, since the temple is one of the country's governing bodies. Apart from the Rose Princesses, the other candidates usually remain in the background. The main character herself was something like a servant every year. Ariana has been nominated by the temple for 2 years in a row, and it looks like it will be the same this year. The royal family selects children with high status, so the girl understands that she will again remain behind the scenes, and it is unlikely that Sven will remember her without a reason. Soon she enters the garden, and remembers that Sven spoke about the way to the place of audience through it. And at that very moment, the maid pours water from a bucket out of the window. The water splashes directly on the girl, and when she turns around, the maid has already run away. Rua notices only part of her hair, and realizes it's clearly no accident, even wondering if Ariana is behind it. But she immediately rejects this thought, realizing that Ariana would not stoop to such a level, especially in the royal palace. Realizing that the dress needs time to dry, the girl wonders what to do next. At this point, Sven's older brother notices her and says that she is probably a candidate for sainthood of Rua Ristato. He then looks at her coldly and asks what she is doing in the royal palace like this. The young lady realizes that before her is the crown prince of Sarid Zito Crown, Sven's older brother, whose outstanding abilities she has heard about. His gaze seems icy, he is strict with himself and others, values manners, and it is not for nothing that he is called the Prince of Ice and Snow. He looks like Sven, but his character is very different, and now he demands an explanation, declaring that he is listening. He asks again why she is standing here like this, and for what reason she is dirtying the royal garden. The main character bows and apologizes for her unsightly appearance. She hesitates to tell the truth about being doused, but she understands that one careless word could start rumors and harm even Sven. Therefore, the girl admits her guilt, saying that due to her own carelessness, she spilled water on herself and promises to immediately change her dress. However, the prince is not satisfied with this answer and says that she is shirking her responsibility. He asks why his brother is spending time with her and demands an explanation before meeting his father, ordering her to come over. At that moment, a cry is heard calling for Sarid, and his wife appears. She says that she saw what was happening and that approaching the girl in wet and cold clothes was extremely rude. Sarid tries to justify himself, but Diana sharply states that he should have first thought about her health and a possible cold. She reminds him that as a future king, he is obliged to think about his actions, and Rua notices how the formidable prince begins to resemble a naughty puppy. The girl wonders with interest who this energetic lady is. She apologizes for being abrupt and introduces herself as Diana Peridot. She says that she is the bride of Prince Sarid, and Rua realizes that this is the ducal house and the future queen. The main character apologizes again for her appearance and introduces herself as Rua from the Restado house. The lady with green hair replies that she knows her and wanted to thank her, to which the girl asks in surprise why. Diana says that she needs to change first and decides to take her to her room since there is no time to return to the temple. Sarid, shocked, declares that inviting a virtually unknown candidate for sainthood is too reckless. But Diana calmly replies that everything is fine because Rua helps Sven, is doing good deeds, and if he can't help, then he shouldn't interfere, after which Sarid falls silent. The main character is surprised to think that the prince is clearly under the thumb of his bride, and perhaps this is a sign of their strong relationship. Diana invites Rua to follow her. After some time, the girl changes into one of the dresses, and the lady with green hair comments on how well it suits her. She says she hasn't worn it for a long time, but it suits Lady Rua perfectly. The main character refuses to accept the dress. Diana asks in surprise if she really likes the old one better, and Rua replies that it's not about that at all. She realizes that the dress from Sven was beautiful, and she feels bad that she is ruining his gift for the second time. Diana just smiles and says that the dress must have been a gift from Sven, and the girl admits that it was. The green-haired lady remarks that she heard about their dance and how close they are. She adds that caring for a specific person is not typical for Sven, but together they help orphans. Rua recalls that it was their excuse at the ball that unexpectedly became the basis of their partnership. She is surprised by Diana's knowledge, and she replies that she knows everything that happens in high society. Diana also mentions that her mother, the same woman with white hair whom Rua saved, was at that ball. The main character asks in amazement if it was really her mother, and Diana, grabbing her hands, says that she is immensely grateful to her savior. She adds that she thanks her from the bottom of her heart, but Rua replies that Galt protected her, and Sven pacified the beast. Diana asks her not to be modest, says that she has heard about her bravery, but notes that it is time for them to have an audience, since they are already expected. Rua asks who exactly is waiting, and Diana replies that she will see everything soon. She suggests having tea sometime, and the girl agrees. Soon Rua enters the hall where knights and servants have gathered. The emperor is there, saying that Rua's contribution was significant, and thanking her for her help in eliminating the consequences of the demonic beast invasion and finding the culprits. The girl replies that she is flattered, and understands that every word of His Majesty carries weight. The emperor invites her to choose any reward and voice her wish. The young lady thinks for a while, and finally decides to speak. She asks to transfer to her the rights to ownership of Baron Restado's mansion. The emperor is surprised, and the girl remembers that the mansion was transferred to the state after the true owner fell into eternal sleep without heirs. According to the law, it was supposed to be demolished in 10 years, and this deadline expires this year. Because of its dark past, no one lived there, and Rua was never able to find out the truth, even without receiving permission to visit the temple and graves. The emperor notes that she is the daughter of a baron, and asks if she thinks the price of the mansion is too high. The girl replies that it is valuable to her personally, because it is her family's place, and if there is a chance, she wants to return it. She understands that this is not connected with revenge but only with an old dream. The emperor says that he understands her and sees no reason to refuse. Rua is surprised and thanks him, and he admits that he expected a request for an engagement with Sven. The girl asks if he is joking when he talks about his engagement to His Highness Sven. But the emperor's serious face makes it clear that this is not a joke, and he speaks of his son's vigilance from childhood. He adds that when Lady Rua is mentioned, Sven appears too casual, and the queen is concerned about this. The main character apologizes and says that, for a person of her status, such thoughts would sound arrogant, because now she is nobody, just one of the candidates. She considers herself unfit for engagement, although she does not understand why these words make her chest ache so much. The emperor remarks that if she were a saint, she would be an ideal match. But the girl replies that the title has been vacant for 10 years, and it was an unrealistic dream, and now her goal is completely different. The emperor ends the conversation, and Rua heads for the exit, feeling very tired. She is glad that her request was fulfilled, but she understands that she needs rest. Despite the journey to the palace, she thinks it's worth returning to the library. And suddenly someone sharply pushes her down the stairs. The stranger immediately runs away, and Rua realizes that this is probably the same girl who poured water on her and understands that she will no longer be able to keep her balance. After this, she begins to fall rapidly down the stairs and closes her eyes, expecting the worst. The next moment, Sven picks her up, greets her, and says with surprise that he didn't expect this at all. He adds that she literally fell out of the sky, and it's a good thing her hair immediately caught his attention. The young lady thanks the prince for saving her and recalls that he said in the morning that he was busy with formal matters, but it seems he has already returned. Sven asks if she's hurt herself, and the girl replies that no, because he managed to catch her, after which she asks him to let her go, a little embarrassed. However, His Highness clarifies whether she simply stumbled, because he is worried that this could happen again. Rua doesn't know what to answer, and the prince suddenly asks why she took off the dress he gave her, and the girl admits that she accidentally got it dirty. Sven says that he is sensitive to lies, and such an answer will not work with him, and the main character looks at him carefully. She thinks about the strange dark aura around him, and doesn't want him to worry too much. In the end, the girl apologizes and admits that someone poured water on her, which is why her dress got dirty. She adds that she was just pushed down the stairs, and it may have been the same person. The prince asks if she remembers the man's appearance, but the girl apologizes and says she is not sure, and Sven replies that he understands. He assumes that someone outside has a grudge and decides to assign Shiji to her as a guard. The main character objects in surprise, saying that this is not necessary. After all, before, this was almost commonplace for her. Sven looks at her sadly and says that she is too used to pain. He adds that difficulties cannot always be avoided, but she can talk to him about them. Rua asks what he means, but at that moment someone approaches them. Seeing the girl, this man drops the apples and asks in surprise, "Is it true that it is Mrs. Rua in front of him, and the girl is looking at him asking if it is Louise?" At that very moment, the young man rushes towards her with an embrace. He joyfully exclaims that he has been waiting for this meeting for so long. His Highness watches what is happening in complete shock. Louise tearfully says that her hair color has changed, but she has become even more beautiful. He thanks God for their second meeting, and the girl shyly replies that she is also glad and asks him to loosen his embrace a little. Sven pulls the guy away and confirms her request, demanding that she let the girl go. He then asks Rua who the rude, bespectacled guy with the apples is, and remarks that he looks like a hired hand, which surprises the girl. Louis quickly bows and apologizes for his disrespectful behavior, but the prince sternly remarks that such behavior is unacceptable and could lead to punishment. The young man is frightened and begs for mercy. The main character turns to Sven and asks him not to threaten without reason. She explains that it is Louis, a former hired hand on their estate who looked after her as a child like an older brother. Louis Liston came from a small eastern country and was the first son and heir to the best store. However, he had no talent for trading, and having run away from his father, he went to look for work in the kingdom of Zito. So he ended up at the Restado estate, where there were always few servants due to the hard work of Rua's mother. Louis became a new employee after a long break. His father liked him as a conscientious servant and a skilled baker. Sometimes he looked after little Rua. Looking at him now, the girl realizes that he has hardly changed in 10 years. It brings back warm nostalgia, and she admits that she worried about him after his owners disappeared. Louis replies that after the tragic events, his father found him and took him back to his homeland. It was later discovered that his third younger sister had a talent for trading. She was recognized as the heir, and he received his freedom. Rua recalls that Louis does have 5 younger sisters. The young man says that 6 months ago he returned to the country and entered the service of Lady Diana Peridot. The prince notices that the boy is working for his brother's fiancée, and Louis confirms this. The main character says she's glad to hear that everything worked out well for him. Louis replies that he was the one who was worried about her all this time. Now, having met again, he wants to tell her something important. He asks to listen carefully and says that he always doubted whether the sudden plunge into eternal sleep of the master, mistress, and youngest son Restado was accidental. It seemed to him that there might be someone's plan behind this. Rua, shocked, asks if he is really talking about a conspiracy, since they were told they had an illness. Louis replies that the cause was given as an unknown disease, but it looks more and more like someone's crime. The girl is shocked and asks what these conclusions are based on. The young man is about to answer, but at that moment the maids scream. They complain about the scattered apples, and Louis apologizes, explaining that he is making apple pie at Diana's request. Rua offers help, but he refuses and asks to continue the conversation later, despite her attempt to object. The prince says that it is better to separate now, take a break, and think everything over. Rua understands that Louis would not say such a thing without reason, and she is frightened by the thought that it was not an illness, but a person who plunged her family into eternal sleep. She wonders who would ever need something like that. Sven looks at her silently. Later, the girl lies in bed and realizes that there have been too many events, and she no longer has the strength to think. Looking at the dress, she decides to tidy it up and return it to Diana. She understands that preparations for the holiday will begin tomorrow, and she wonders who will be chosen as the Rose Princess. She is troubled by Louis's words and the fate of the mansion, and the thought that the family could have been deliberately put into eternal sleep does not give her peace. At this moment there is a knock on the door, and the girl allows entry. Shiji comes into the room and wishes Rua good morning. He informs her that from this day on he is her guard, and will be there 24/7 on Sven's orders. The girl is surprised at first, but remembers that they really could have wished her harm. So Sven assigns Shiji to her, showing his concern. The young man hands over a letter from the royal palace, and Rua thinks it might be a deed to the mansion. After all, such a letter would confirm her right of ownership. But after reading it, the girl exclaims that this is some kind of mistake. After that, she rushes to the secret meeting place with Sven. Once inside, she loudly asks if he is here, because she needs to clarify something. The prince is glad to see her, and says that he admired the blossoming white roses, inviting her to look. But Rua replies that the flowers can wait, because there is something more important. She shows the letter and asks what her appointment as this year's Rose Princess means, and whether he nominated her, to which Sven replies that it was not him. He assumes that the idea belonged to his brother's fiancée, and the girl is thinking about Diana. The prince adds that the decision was supported by many in the palace for her contribution to Redmond's case, almost unanimously. Rua guesses that only Sarid was against it, but it was Diana who nominated her. Sven asks if she wanted to become a Rose Princess. The girl replies that it's not a matter of desire, but rather that she is the worst candidate for such a role. But the prince says he thinks Rua is the perfect fit. He adds that he would be happy to see her in this outfit. Rua is confused, and Sven points out that this might help their revenge plan, and she asks how exactly. He explains that her status will rise. Her words will become more significant, which is important for exposing the crimes of the head of the clergy, and the girl agrees. She says that in this case, she will play the role of the Rose Princess and earn people's trust. She then asks about the second princess, and Sven replies that the one chosen was from the temple. Lady Torbius. At this time, she is in the temple and calls Galt to come look. She shows the Rose Princess's special veil and asks if she is not beautiful. Galt replies that he understands her desire to boast, but there is a gang of criminals operating in the city. The Knights' Order received a request for assistance, as there are always those who lose their composure before the ceremony. Ariana asks why he is saying this, and Galt replies that it is difficult for him to come to her at such a time. He reminds her that he has his own responsibilities, and the girl irritably asks if it is possible to delegate this to his subordinates. She says that he should have just praised her, because she will become the Rose Princess for the 3rd year in a row, but the guy replies that it does not change anything. Ariana interrupts him and asks what is more important to him, her or his responsibilities. Galt replies that forcing him to make such a choice is wrong. The girl just gets upset, pretends to cry, and immediately declares how insensitive Galt is. After this, the young lady asks if he really hates her. The guy is surprised, immediately apologizes, and says that he shouldn't have been so rude, and of course, he doesn't hate her. The young man hugs Ariana, but the girl only sniffles and asks if simple words of apology are enough if he hurt Ari. At the same time, she thinks how sad it is, because they say that Rua will become the second Princess of Roses, and this seems disgusting to her. The girl understands that she needs to find a way out of this situation as quickly as possible, and personally see how this defective saint falls. Meanwhile, the main character is next to the prince and asks if everything will be okay with Ariana. His Highness replies that he has taken measures by assigning Shiji to her, and believes that the head of the clergy will not act rashly until the end of the ceremony. However, he doesn't know what might come into this girl's head, and he doesn't forget about the ill-wisher who poured water on her and pushed her down the stairs. The guy says they will move on to the next stage of the plan immediately after the party ends, and hopes that everything goes without incident. The main character replies that she understands and turns to Mr. Shiji, returning to the beginning of the conversation. She thanks him for agreeing to guard her. The guy replies that no thanks are needed, and he will do everything possible to protect her. The prince adds that immediately after the celebrations are over, she will become the official owner of the mansion. The girl understands that Sven has probably already discussed this with His Majesty and is still worried about Louis's words, but decides to focus on the main thing, her role as the Rose Princess. The guy says that it's time for him to return to the palace and asks if she's leaving too, to which the girl agrees. As the young lady leaves with the prince, the same girl who pushed her down the stairs watches her from behind a tree and thinks that Mr. Sven is as handsome as ever. She doesn't understand why he's seeing this girl off, since she's not his fiancée. The brunette considers Rua Ristato a bad girl who is fooling Mr. Sven. Grinding her teeth and biting her nails, she decides that she will never accept this girl as the Rose Princess and must drive her away. After this, the young lady takes the pendant, opens it, and looks at the photograph of the prince inside. She mentally asks him to wait a little, and at this time the main character remembers that the birthday celebration lasts 3 days. During the first 2 days, the chosen Rose Princesses go around the capital and distribute roses grown in the temple to the people. The recipient of the sacred rose keeps it until the 5th day of the festival, and on the evening of the last day, the Rose Princess performs a melody on the piano on the stage of the capital. The piece is dedicated to the goddess Rush, who is believed to have been particularly fond of this instrument. After the performance is completed, instead of applauding, the people throw sacred roses, and this is a special tradition of the holiday. The young lady realizes that handing out roses is not difficult, but playing the piano becomes a real challenge. She hasn't touched an instrument since she came to the temple, so she decides to take some lessons from the previous Rose Princess. The girl then turns to Sir Shiji, and he asks if Lady Rua has a request. She replies that even if he is assigned to guard her, he is not obliged to accompany her everywhere. The guy says that by order of His Majesty Sven, he must protect her and not leave her alone for a moment, and the girl is once again convinced of his reliability. Shiji adds that he has long wanted to tell her one thing. He asks to be called simply Shiji, considering other forms of address inappropriate, and the main character tries to object. But the guy says that Madame Rua is a valuable person for His Highness, so he should treat her with respect and hopes for reciprocal treatment. The young lady thinks he means valuable person since she is only an accomplice and says that she will maintain her former behavior in public. And when they are alone, she will call him by name, after which the guy smiles. He says let the lady do as she wishes. The main character notices that Shiji is truly ready to do anything for Sven. The boy replies that His Highness saved his life, took care of him, and allowed everyone to think that he was from a provincial town in a Western country. In reality, he grew up in the slums, was abandoned, and survived by swallowing dirt. Overcoming all this, he tried to get out by adopting knowledge from random traders. He gained experience from hired soldiers, and people called people like him an eyesore and accused him of stealing. One day, the rich people almost tortured him into eternal sleep, and it was at that moment that the prince saved him, saying that he had been following his movements for a long time. He added that the boy had caught his attention on the trip and was too talented to fall into eternal sleep in such a place. Shiji then looked at His Highness in complete shock. The prince asked him if he would like to serve him, since he had nothing to lose. He helped the boy up, and now Shiji is speaking. That from that day on, his life belonged to His Highness, and he would carry out any order for his purpose. The main character realizes that she and Shiji are similar, because Sven also extended a helping hand to her and gave her a reason to live. Now she clearly understands that for her own revenge, she must play the role of the Rose Princess perfectly. After this, the girl opens one of the doors and upon entering, is a little surprised. She thinks that this lady could also be a Rose Princess. This girl's name is Nern Sandra. She is the only daughter of Chancellor Sandra, and, like Rua, is a candidate for sainthood. However, she prefers solitude and shows no interest in social life. Despite this, due to her high birth, no one criticizes her, and she carries out her duties with coldness and restraint, remaining the only candidate with a higher birth than Ariana. The main character thinks that she doesn't know at all what kind of person she is. She can't read minds and knows it might just be her imagination, but the feeling doesn't leave her. The brunette asks if she is Lady Rua Restado, and says that she received a request from the palace to explain the nuances of the role of the Rose Princess, to which the heroine agrees and thanks her for her help. But the girl bites her lip and asks why they chose someone like her. The young lady apologizes and asks if she said something, but in response, she hears that she imagined it. Nern says her task is to teach piano for the performance on the last day, but before the lesson begins, she asks the escort to leave. After all, this is a private lesson, intended only for the Rose Princess. The main character exchanges glances with Shiji and nods. The guy says he will do as they ask and will wait outside the door. He adds that in case of emergency, he will break in without permission. After this, he bows and leaves. The main character hears the indignant words of Nern, who says that this girl is already with both Mr. Shiji and Mr. Sven. She asks why this girl has it so easy, and Rua asks what happened, realizing that Sven's name was mentioned. The brunette turns around at the address and asks what is going on. At that very moment, the pendant on her neck breaks and falls to the floor, and the main character bends down to pick it up. Looking at the pendant, she realizes that it is very familiar to her. It resembles the stone that the girl who bullied her had. The brunette abruptly snatches the pendant, screams for it not to be touched, squeezes it in her hands and gets angry, and the heroine is perplexed. After this, the girl apologizes for her violent reaction and offers to return to the lesson, to which Rua agrees. But she clearly understands that this pendant belonged to the one who doused her with water and pushed her down the stairs. At the same time, the heroine realizes that she cannot accuse her without serious evidence and wonders whether the reason for her actions was her appointment as the Rose Princess or something else. She decides to remain quiet for now and watch the situation develop. Nern says there are a few key points to understand in order to learn to play a melody. She adds that aristocrats study such works during their education. Last year, Ms. Ariana performed a tune called Thorns of the Rose. She chose a prayer composition, and looking at the notes, the heroine realizes that they are all very complex. Ariana is skilled in both dancing and playing the piano. The brunette says that even if Rua won't play as well, she's still from a noble family and can handle at least one. The main character understands that they look down on her and speak sarcastically without hiding it, but she replies that difficulties do not mean impossibility. She adds that her late mother's talent was talked about in social circles. The brunette asks if there were any because she heard that her skill was very modest. The heroine can barely contain her rage, realizing that now the mockery also concerns her mother. Nern asks what exactly she is going to perform, and Rua replies that she will choose the Maiden Song. She realizes that it was her mother's favorite melody. The brunette asks if she is too complicated, and if it would be better to choose another one. She points to one of them, and the heroine thinks that it is a children's ballad and that performing it will make her a laughingstock. Nern thinks that she still doesn't understand why this idiot was chosen as the Rose Princess. She remembers sitting next to her father, crying, and asking why she wasn't chosen this year. But the royal family gave preference to Rua Ristato, and the father turned to his daughter. He asked her not to cry and said that her name was also considered. But the majority of votes went to this girl, and the brunette shouted that even her healing abilities were flawed and that she was an orphan. She understood that, despite this, at the reception with the Viscount, Mr. Sven behaved at ease. Although she was his fiancée, her father reminded her that becoming a Rose Princess 2 years in a row was almost impossible. The girl insisted that Mrs. Ariana from the Torbius family had also managed to achieve her goal. The man replied that all this was due to the patronage of the head of the temple, who nominated her year after year. But the girl, continuing to cry, said that it was unfair because he had promised her on the day of her mother's immersion into eternal sleep. He vowed to do everything possible for her, apologized, and said that he would buy her everything she wanted. He only asked that she heal her wounded soul, adding that it was already late and she should go and rest in her room. The young lady heads to her room and realizes that she desires only one thing, Mr. Sven. Entering the room, the girl begins to worship the prince and says that he always looks only at that girl. She asks how much longer she must wait for his gaze, realizing that she does not need the title of Princess of Roses. She only wanted her father's help and the attention of His Highness. She dreams of seeing him again as he was when they first met, considering herself his bride from the day he smiled at her. These thoughts bring her back to him again and again. The girl thinks that no matter what dirty methods she has to use, she will become a Rose Princess and will definitely please Mr. Sven. She decides to eliminate Rua Ristato at any cost. Now the brunette says that Lady Rua should at least put on a decent performance. She adds that she can calmly train in this gym, and she will come later to check the result, and if she is not confident, she can refuse. The main character remembers how she was bullied in the temple, and understands that even now she lacks the courage to respond because they look at her as a worthless person. She can't give a decent answer, and the brunette coldly says that they will see each other again then. Shiji enters the room and tells Rua that the respected candidate is showing strong hostility and may be a threat, suggesting that she report to Sven. The young lady replies that there is no point in bothering Sven with trifles. She understands that the brunette insulted not only her, but also her mother. Therefore, the girl decides to repay in the same coin, but in her own way, realizing that she will never forgive the pain and humiliation caused. The main character turns to Shiji and says that she has only one request. And in the brunette's thoughts, it comes to mind that she has always been attracted not to beautiful things, but to sinister ones. These could have been cursed dolls, or paintings made with human red fluid, or the jewels of executed kings. She asked her father for only things with a dark history, and on the day of the meeting with Mr. Sven, called the unwanted child, she was struck by the cold darkness hidden behind his refined exterior. Then he asked if she was the daughter of Minister Nern Sandra. He introduced himself politely, and the moment Sven smiled, the girl understood everything. She decided that there was a special connection between them and that only she was able to understand Mr. Sven. Only she is suitable for the role of his bride, and only she can become it. From that day on, they did not meet again, and the girl patiently waited for him to come for her. Now she didn't understand why he had chosen a stranger, this defective saint, who could only cause him pain. She thought that everything would be easier if she gave up the role of the Rose Princess. But 3 weeks had already passed. 3 days remained until the holiday, and there was no talk of a worthy performance from her. And suddenly she hears a complex melody with a fast rhythm and passages that even she herself could not perform. She is amazed by the flawlessness of the game and jumps up from her seat, wondering if this is really the same girl. She bursts into the room and shouts why Lady Rua is playing this melody. The main character greets Nern and remarks that it is not very polite to barge in and interrupt someone else's game. The brunette becomes furious and abruptly throws the notes off the stand. She screams how someone like her is able to play such a melody. The heroine exchanges glances with Shiji and calmly replies that she taught her at the age of 7. It was the last melody her mother taught her before she fell into eternal sleep, and she hadn't wanted to choose it, but Lady Diana advised her to. The lady with green hair then asked if the girl would like piano lessons. Rua apologized for the sudden appeal, said that she came to return the dress, and at the same time to talk about it. She remembered Shiji's words about Lady Diana having outstanding abilities among the aristocrats. She confirmed this, adding that even Mr. Sarid approves of her performance. Diana approached Louis, and he enthusiastically agreed. He added that Rua was very talented as a child and inherited her mother's abilities. Rua said Louis was exaggerating, but he just smiled warmly. She admitted that her skills had weakened and needed to be restored urgently before the Rose Princess performance. She hoped for Diana's advice, but she laughed and said that she had a worthy rival. After all, this girl is also a princess of roses, and Diana grabbed Rua by the hands, talking about rivalry. She stated that if you take on a task, you should polish it to perfection, choose a good melody, and practice from morning until evening. Diana warned that her instructions would be strict and asked if Rua was ready to follow them. The heroine smiled and said that she had already experienced all kinds of pain. Therefore, she will not give up and will not give up the title of Rose Princess, playing her role to the end. After all, someone who is only capable of causing pain to others is not worthy of the title of Saint or Rose Princess. The brunette fiercely clutched the pendant with the image of His Majesty. She turned and ran out, and Shiji told Rua that she had done a great job and carried herself just right. The heroine hopes that Lady Nern will now give in peacefully. And the brunette rushes down the corridor, not understanding why everything turned out as if she lost. She runs into the rose garden and opens a pendant with a picture of Mr. Sven, and she asks him to console her, not noticing how Ariana appears behind her. She cheerfully comes up and asks what Nern is doing here. The brunette turns around in shock and recognizes Ms. Ariana. The blonde smiles and says that she saw everything she did. Nern is at a loss, but Ariana assures her that there is nothing wrong with that. She says Nern is wonderful, and the real problem is Rua. The brunette asks if she is the bad one, and Ariana replies that it is Rua who is wrong. Nern repeats this as if in a trance, and the blonde says that this is why Rue must be destroyed. Nern replies that there are 3 days left until the holiday. It is almost impossible to deprive her of the title, and Shiji is protecting her. Ariana whispers that the title can't be stripped, but Rue can still be eliminated. After all, there will always be a moment when the guard leaves. She quietly convinces Nirna that she can handle this eyesore. The days of celebration are coming soon. The heroine looks at the carts with roses and understands that she must distribute them within 2 days. She realizes that this will be more difficult than it seemed. She thinks that Ariana has already started her duties and is surprised by her calmness when they meet. Ariana says the long-awaited celebration has finally begun. She reminds them that they are both Rose Princesses and suggests that they try to be equal. The heroine looks at her with distrust, sensing a catch. They rarely cross paths, replacing each other in the city, and will meet again only on the last day at the piano. Rua doesn't understand what Ariana is planning and whether she should be afraid. Shiji announces that it's time for them to leave. The heroine agrees, but feels anxious before going to the city. She asks if Shiji will accompany her. He replies that 2 more nights have been assigned to her, but he himself will continue to follow the decree of His Highness Sven. The prince appears, confirms this, and says that he has not seen Rua for a long time due to business with foreign delegates. He asks if she is talking about those ill-mannered messengers. According to him, they are more interested in entertainment than traditions, and they cause nothing but problems. He adds that his brother wanted to make him an ambassador, but he took it upon himself, and the heroine thinks that Sarid was furious. Sven says that he almost died of loneliness without meeting her, and the girl smiles, considering this an exaggeration. He jokingly tells Shiji that he can be by her side forever, and he becomes flustered, apologizing. Rua asks Shiji not to apologize and tells Sven not to tease him. She thinks about why she feels so calm around Sven. With him she can breathe freely, because in the last few days her nerves were at their limit. And it seemed to her that she was very lonely. Sven says that it's time for him to go back, and he's glad he was able to see her before he left. He admits that he wanted to see her in the image of the Rose Princess up close. And he adds that she is the most beautiful Rose Princess of all he has seen, so let the people greet her with their heads held high. The prince gently kisses her hand and says that he looks forward to her performance. Then he says goodbye and assures that they will definitely see each other again. The young lady, watching him go, understands that he is always able to dispel her worries. As His Highness passes by Shiji, they merely exchange glances, and Shiji nods, showing that he understands. A little later, the main character is already distributing flowers, and people are genuinely happy about it. As she hands over the roses, she says that blessings may come with them. However, looking into the basket, the girl realizes that she hasn't even given away half of it yet. It looks like it's going to take a while, and she's curious about how Ariana is doing. Shiji turns to Lady Rua and warns that some might take advantage of the confusion and attack, as the knights are not very experienced in such conditions right now, so he asks her to be careful. At this moment, the main character notices a guy who has just stolen someone's wallet. She notes that he is too fast and is clearly a pickpocket, and Shiji agrees. The young lady realizes that he is skillfully avoiding the knight's gaze and is clearly acting like a professional. Shiji is about to intervene, but the girl stops him, saying that she can handle it herself without making the situation worse with her position. She reminds Shiji that his main job is to protect her. After this, the young lady moves on. She offers the pickpocket a rose, but the guy turns around and refuses, clearly about to say something else. The main character calmly adds that today is a holiday. She touches his hand and asks him not to be shy, but at that very moment the guy is overcome by severe dizziness. He gets confused, not understanding what is happening, because everything starts to swim before his eyes. The guy falls, and his bag opens right on the ground. Other people's wallets spill out of it, and people are shocked to recognize their own things. The crowd immediately starts shouting and demanding that the pickpocket be caught. The main character, already leaving, snaps her fingers and thinks that security usually works better, but the holiday really does complicate everything. A man approaches her and apologizes, saying that it was she who helped catch the pickpocket. The girl replies that her activities are still bearing fruit. Turning around, she realizes with surprise who is standing in front of her. It turns out to be Charlotte, who says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The main character is happy to see her in good health and notices Mr. Allen, the baker, nearby. Allen confirms this and says that his wife has helped him a lot, to which the young lady asks if he was really talking about his wife. Charlotte explains that after that incident with Redmond, Allen proposed to her. And just recently, they finally got married. The main character sincerely congratulates them, and Charlotte adds that the proceeds were donated to Redmond's victims. Their families felt better, and the damage from the magical beasts has since completely disappeared. Charlotte says it's all thanks to Madame Rua and His Highness Sven. She claims that it was Mrs. Rua who healed not only their bodies, but also their souls. Calling her a truly respected saint, the main character only laughs and says that this is an exaggeration. But deep down she thinks how strange it is to hear such a thing, knowing the power she wields. Remembering the flowers, the girl hands them a rose each and offers to take it. Charlotte thanks him and says that on the last day she will throw this white rose during her performance. The main character is surprised, and Charlotte explains that this is a folk custom. Tomorrow, another rose princess will also present a rose, and in the end people will choose one of the two. The one given by the more respected princess will be thrown into the air. Allen compares it to voting, and the young lady understands that the rose is the voice of the people. The guy adds that piano playing and good deeds are evaluated, and it is the people themselves who decide this. The girl realizes that even if it doesn't have a direct impact, public support can change a lot. Charlotte enthusiastically says that they will support Mrs. Rua, and Allen agrees. The main character, looking at them, understands that she is happy for their happiness. The next day, in the same place, a lady with dark hair distributes roses. She also asks to throw a rose after playing the piano, but he emphasizes that it must be a yellow rose, and Glenn notices that Ariana is in a good mood. Even after seeing a huge number of roses, she complains, but still remains kind to children and the elderly. So it's clear that Ariana is a really kind girl. At this moment, Galt hears a child crying and comes to find out what happened. The mother explains that the child was injured by the thorns on the rose. Galt examines the finger and says that the wound is not deep, suggesting that he turn to the Rose Princess. He assures that the kind candidate will definitely help, but the boy gets scared and refuses, and the mother tries to calm him down. Galt is surprised, and the woman apologizes and tells about the past attack of the magical beast. Then, the first to respond was that very Rose Princess. But when the mother asked to heal the child, the candidate only looked at them with disgust. She turned away and said that she couldn't help in this condition. The boy then grabbed her veil, and his mother begged for help. But the blonde suddenly tore the veil away and screamed. She demanded not to dirty it and left. The woman says that later another candidate came and healed the child. Now the boy is sure that the Rose Princess was evil. The mother calms him down and asks him not to scream. She apologizes to Galt and asks him not to attach importance to the conversation, after which they leave, deciding to treat the wound at home. Galt thinks about it, because the difference in the candidates' strengths is small. He doubts whether it was really about Ariana. Looking at her, he wonders if it was really she who saved him. The main character reflects that yesterday was a hard day, and today there will be almost no time either. Someone turns to the second Rose Princess, noticing that she is not currently distributing flowers. The children call her, and the girl smiles back at them. She understands that security still limits her freedom. The young lady also remembers the subsidy and thinks that she can still find something useful. Her gaze catches the counter, and she moves closer. Taking the bottle, the girl notes how beautiful it looks. The red hue reminds her of the color of Sven's eyes. The seller recognizes her as the Rose Princess and suggests that she not be shy. He explains that this is a perfume made from a rare flower from the southern islands. The girl tries the scent and immediately realizes that she likes it. There is both freshness and sweetness in it, which reminds her even more of Sven. The seller adds that this scent is loved by noble men of the southern islands. The young lady wonders if she can give this to Sven. Shiji suddenly asks her if she is thinking about His Highness, and the girl becomes frightened. She sheepishly replies that she would not disturb the royal family over trifles. Ciji says Sven rarely wears perfume, but is interested in southern culture. Looking at the bottle, the girl thinks that he might like it. Ciji adds that Sven will be happy with any gift from her. The young lady clarifies this, and Shiji confirms. After thinking for a bit, the girl decides to take the bottle. As she leaves the shop, she notices a noise nearby and asks what is going on. Shiji asks to wait and goes to check himself. He learns that the bar is hosting a drinking competition with bets. People say that Malta from the butcher shop usually wins. But this time, the hooded stranger is frighteningly strong. The main character is surprised that such entertainment exists in the city. Taking a closer look at the participants, she realizes that it is none other than Mrs. Diana. Upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that the man behind is Louis. The protagonist approaches him and calmly asks what they're doing in such a place. The guy just smiles and says with mild surprise that he finally got to see Ms. Rua. He comments on how well her Rose Princess outfit suits her, assuring her that this look will definitely go down in history as the best. The main character asks him not to dwell on this and demands an explanation. Louis replies that, frankly, he had originally planned to do the same as the younger prince, His Highness Sarid, had once done. He intended to take Lady Diana with him to secretly observe the festivities, and at first she really enjoyed the time. But later, His Highness Sarid became busy receiving guests, and then Lady Diana offered him her help. However, he merely told her to go and enjoy the festivities alone. Louis adds that Lady Diana was angry, and from then on, her behavior was completely unbecoming of an aristocrat, and the protagonist realizes that Sarid is a complete misreader of a woman's heart. She realizes that everything turned out this way because of the eccentricity Sven imposed on him. She asks if Louis is the only one accompanying her, and he confidently replies that he is. He also explains that the ducal family's elite guards are scattered in various locations. Louis admits that he couldn't even handle Lord Louis. He remarks that Mrs. Rua should know this better than anyone. The girl realizes that this refers to the name of her late brother, whom she hasn't heard for a long time. Louis was still very young then. Noticing the look on her face, he said he'd like to arrange a meeting after the party to discuss an important matter. The question concerns the death of her family, and he understands that it could all seem like a cruel joke, but the protagonist replies that his fears are unfounded. After the celebration, she is going to make a statement, so she asks for everything to be explained to her properly. Louis says Ms. Rua has only grown stronger over the years. She clenches her fist, realizing the truth can only bring pain. But she's ready to accept it and move on. After a while, the girl heads toward the stage with the piano. She realizes that the last day of the celebration is beginning. People gather around the stage, and one of the girls joyfully announces that the final part of the celebration has arrived. The guys are chatting among themselves, and one reminds his friend not to forget to throw a rose. The other assures him he won't forget, because it's the highlight of the celebration. A priest steps onto the stage and asks for silence. The crowd notices that the head of the clergy is speaking, and someone comments that everything looks very elegant. The priest says that magical monsters have caused enormous damage to people in recent years, but thanks to the dedication of the temple, the number of those plunged into eternal sleep has been reduced. He admits that it was scary and difficult for people, but this is precisely why the temple and the holy candidates exist. Thanks to them, they can peacefully complete this year's celebration. With a smile, he urges them to be grateful for the temple's existence. He also speaks of loyalty to the goddess Rush. The people loudly agree, declaring that the high priest always thinks of the people. The main character realizes that, as always, he seems kind and knows how to touch people's souls, not forgetting to strengthen their faith in the goddess. None of them realize that it is he who secretly controls the attacks of the magical beasts, and the heroes will definitely tear this mask off him. At this point, someone turns to the Rose Princess and informs her that there will be a piano performance right after. He asks her to come over to finish her costume, and she agrees. She tells Shiji that she will go out, and he replies that he will wait for her near the stage. Entering the costume preparation room, the main character is a little surprised. There she sees Ariana. The girl notes that there have been no attacks so far, but still believes it's too early to relax. Ariana turns to Rua, confirming it's her, and asks what's wrong, noticing her frightened expression. Smiling, she asks if she's nervous before the performance. Ariana says Rua performs after her, and the comparison is unavoidable. Then, with the same smile, she adds that there is a significant difference between them. She has a home to return to, and the status of an educated aristocrat. The protagonist clearly senses the natural contempt in these words. The blonde adds that everything will be fine, and if Rua performs well, she will receive at least a few roses. The main character thinks how strange this whole situation is. Ariana heads to the stage and tells Rua not to lose heart and just play. Then Rua asks Ariana to listen to her at least once, and the blonde turns around, asking what's wrong. Rua reminds her of how Ariana spoke to her very kindly when they first met at the temple, and asks if she remembers it. She remembers how the other girls said that she was from the family of the Marquis Restato, and that only Rua remained alive. Others claimed that her abilities were a defect, because the high priest said so, and one girl even said that she did not want to go to the temple with her at the same time. Then, Rua realized she no longer had a home, and just then, someone approached her. It was Ariana who asked if her name was Rua. The girl, frightened and stuttering, replied that it was. Ariana said that Rua made a good impression and offered friendship, extending her hand and introducing herself as a representative of the Count of Torbias's family. She gave her name, Ariana Torbias, and said she was glad to meet her. Now Rua realizes that her smile truly reassured her. Now Rua asks if Ariana really had intended to use her back then. The blonde replies that's exactly what she had in mind. Back then, she thought of Rua as someone who was easy to use. These words stun Rua, and Ariana calmly adds that she called her a convenient toy and entertainment. She laughs and asks if anyone would want to be an equal friend to a defective holy orphan, calling Rua a slow thinker. Rua replied that she understood everything, because Ariana had been like this since childhood. She realized that in that state, she could easily have lost her temper, and grabbed her hand. But most of all, she wants to expose Ariana's sins and the high priest's true nature. For perfect revenge, she must restrain her emotions, conceal her strength, and bide her time. At this point, the priest finishes his speech and announces the first Rose Princess. Ariana realizes it's her turn and hurries. As she leaves, the main character tells her that one day, the day of reckoning for all sins will come. She then loudly adds that it will be done by her own hands. Ariana just smiles and wishes her luck. As she leaves, she thinks that this is only possible if Rua lives to see that day. Meanwhile, the black-haired lady around the corner laughs quietly. She says that after Ariana's performance, it will be Rua's turn, and then there will be the perfect moment to attack, remembering the blonde's words about eliminating the interference. The brunette agrees and decides that no one should interfere, because she needs to erase from her life everyone who takes Mr. Sven away from her. To this end, she secretly rigged the stage with a simple system beforehand. If the rope was pulled, the stage would collapse directly onto the performer. It must look like an accident during Lady Rua's performance. Nern smiles and says he longs to hear Rua Ristato's last performance and give her a requiem. Ariana plays the piano at this point, and the audience admires her graceful performance. People in the crowd ask if she wasn't a candidate for sainthood and a Rose Princess in previous years. Many believe she's the closest thing to a saint. The blonde loves having so many eyes on her, and all the applause directed at her. Having finished the game, she bows and thinks that the place of the saint is already very close. After Ariana, Rua takes the stage. She realizes her opponent's performance was solid, and now it's her turn. She wonders if Sven is somewhere nearby and will hear her playing. Rua tries to focus on the melody, but catches himself thinking about other things, realizing that the guy is too busy right now. At this moment, the brunette whispers that the time has come and wishes for Rua Ristato to finally fall into eternal sleep. As she reaches for the rope, Shiji suddenly grabs her hand, and the girl is shocked to think how he found out everything. Then a voice is heard addressing Lady Sandra, reproaching her for going too far. It turns out to be His Highness. He asks if she is one of those who makes noise during a great performance. The brunette is confused and, to her horror, recognizes Mr. Sven. He says he heard from Shiji about her attempts to harm Ria. He mentions both Rue being doused with water and the collision down the stairs, emphasizing that such things cannot be hidden in the royal palace. Although Rua wanted to sort things out without his intervention, Shiji emphasizes that he is obliged to report everything by order of His Highness. The brunette panicked and claimed it was a misunderstanding. The prince, however, said they were aware of her current actions and that the equipment had already been found and neutralized. He asks if she understands that even if she tried, the stage would not have collapsed. The girl, in despair, says that it was a mistake and that she was simply interested in the rope, without doing anything with the scenery. Nern begs him to believe her, reminding him that she is his fiancée. But Sven coldly replies that he doesn't remember her being one. He asks Shiji if he got engaged to this girl, and he bluntly states that it is not true. Nern despairingly says that Sven loves her, remembering their first meeting and his sincere smile. Sven just smirks, noticing how hard it is for Minister Sandru with such a daughter who is dragging him down. The girl doesn't understand what he means, and the prince talks about rumors at court about an imminent change of minister. She realizes with horror that this is about her father's resignation. Sven admits that he was once worthy of the post, but now it is clear that his priority has become personal gain and a successor has already been chosen. The candidacy was approved by decree of the king's brother, and only Sandra's unwillingness to give up power delayed the process. His daughter's behavior, which will soon become public knowledge, will put everything in its place. The girl is horrified, thinking things have gone too far. The prince, however, says it would be helpful to make her brother her debtor. With tears, Nern begs Sven for mercy, opens the pendant and begs him to look. She speaks of her devotion, love, and connection to fate, claiming that she did everything for him. Sven coldly asks if this is true, and adds that he does not tolerate intrusive people. The girl asks him in fear what he means, feeling his gaze as an obstacle. The prince declares that without her status as the minister's daughter, she meant nothing to him, and will soon lose even that. He says he tolerated the insults directed at Rua, but the attempt to hurt her was the last straw for his anger. Nern falls to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Sven replies that any attempt to harm the Rose Princess will be punished immediately. He declares that she will never see him again, snaps his fingers, and the knights immediately take the girl away. She screams, begging to be let go, calling for Sven again and again, but he only turns to Lady Nirna Sandra and calmly says goodbye. The girl looks after him in despair, her hand unclenches, and the pendant falls. She realizes she knew what she was enchanted by. It was that dark coldness hidden behind the beauty, but in reality he turned out to be much more terrible than she thought. Realizing her mistake, she screams in horror. The prince turns to Shiji and says that all this has become a serious concern for him. Shiji replies that he acted on orders and it was not difficult, because Lady Sandra left a lot of evidence, unlike Lady Torbiaz. He notes that she acts far more cunningly and dangerously, almost like the head of the clergy. The prince says he will no longer allow them to do whatever they please. Shiji bows and promises to obey, but clarifies what punishment awaits Lady Sandra, since she is still a candidate for the place of saint, and was the Princess of Roses. He suggests exiling her to a small local temple, where problematic candidates are usually sent, since the path to the saint is closed to her. The prince replies that now it is possible to talk openly about resignation, since the minister could have saved at least something if he had retreated in time, even at the cost of wealth and power. The parent and child have no choice but to swallow their pride and move to the countryside. But at that moment, the prince hears loud applause coming from the stage. He quietly remarks that it looks like Ms. Rua has already finished her performance. The young man's expression sags slightly, and he adds regretfully that he never got to really listen to her, deciding that next time, he'll ask Rua to play just for him. Shiji asks His Highness what he thinks about duets with the violin, since the prince is an excellent player of string instruments, and such an idea could be truly impressive. The prince just smiles and says that the decision has been made, but first he must give Ruya credit for her performance. Meanwhile, the crowd is discussing how magnificent the White Rose Princess's performance was. One of the girls says it's the best she's heard in years, especially considering the complexity of the melody. One of the guys admits that he doesn't know how a professional would rate it, but personally, the melody touched him deeply with its beauty and hidden sadness. The girl holds up a white rose and says she's ready to vote for this princess. The boy next to her agrees and adds that he'll throw a white rose too. Another guy admits that he wants to throw away the yellow rose too, because that girl's performance was bold and bright, and now it's becoming increasingly difficult to choose. Charlotte loudly exclaims that Madame Roy performed flawlessly and deserves only a white rose, after which she passionately declares that she is the best. Ellen gently pulls Charlotte back, asking her to tone down her ardor while the main character is still on stage. Ariana, watching the scene unfold, feels all her joy evaporate after the enthusiastic shouts directed at Rui. She feels as if Nern has made a mistake, even though she was sure the other girl was useless. She thinks that later her name will certainly be mentioned as the instigator, but then she convinces herself that no one will seriously listen to the words of a gloomy, crazy person. The blonde decides that if this girl is just a pawn, she should at least be of use to the queen. At that moment, the priest enters the stage and announces the end of the celebration. He thanks the Rose Princesses for brightening up the event with their performances and asks everyone to throw roses into the air, after which people begin to pick up the flowers. Looking around, it's clear the roses are almost evenly distributed, but there are still more white ones. The crowd says the performances were wonderful, and many are already looking forward to next year. Gold looks at the assembled group and wonders if the celebration has already come to an end. He notices a yellow rose on the ground and breathes a sigh of relief, realizing that despite the minor annoyances, everything went off without any major incidents. He picks up the rose and, inhaling its aroma, admits that Ari's performance was also wonderful, but it was Lady Rastada's melody that touched him most. And yet he can't see in her the ugly candidate who allegedly bullied Ari. Apparently, there are quite a few people in the city who are passionately supporting her, and Galt clearly sees that there are indeed more white roses. But he reminds himself that it was Ari who healed him, and he shakes his head, casting aside his doubts, convincing himself that he never doubted his fiancée. The guy decides that he should talk to Ari directly, tell her about his suspicions, and at the same time, praise her performance. After some time, he enters the room where the lady with blonde hair is, turns to Ari, and is about to speak. But at that very moment, he sees the girl pouring a glass of water on the maid and freezes in surprise. The blonde loudly protests, declaring that she was talking about thirst, and asks how anyone can drink such disgusting water. She then orders a fruit drink to be brought immediately, and the maid, agreeing and apologizing, runs off hastily. But Ariana doesn't calm down and lashes out at another maid, accusing her of not even preparing a chair despite her fatigue. The maid immediately brings a chair, promising to fix everything. Ariana sits down and fumes, considering her performance a complete disappointment. The votes aren't counted yet, but it's clear to her that there were more white roses. She doesn't understand where Rui's poor performance could have been better, considering those around her to be blind fools. The girl eagerly awaits the moment when His Holiness will put his plan into action, and she will finally become a saint. Galt approaches the blonde and addresses her cautiously. In response, the girl turns to him in tears and asks him to console the unfortunate Ari. She throws herself into his arms and says that she is terribly annoyed that she gave in to Ruya, accusing her of ridicule and humiliation. Ariana is certain she's using some kind of dirty trick. Galt is surprised but admits that's exactly why he came, to sort this out. However, the girl immediately cries out that he, of course, considers Ari's performance to be the best. The guy becomes even more confused and says that this is not true and that is not what he meant at all. But through her tears, Ariana calls him cruel, believing he's not on her side either. Galt doesn't know what to do and realizes he can't ask her now, meaning he'll have to find out the truth himself. The girl starts hitting Galt, shouting at him for being a fool, but he just blames himself and asks Ari to stop crying.